Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support, let alone feedback. At that moment, Chelsea walked up to Blaine. That's it? You're just letting the three beasts go? I have my reasons. Blaine replied. After all, the three beasts were Asdeath's subordinates. He spared them as a favor to her. Besides, once he defeated Asdeath, he intended to bring both her and the three beasts under his command. Blaine never let people live without a reason. Lord Blaine, my father would like to invite you to the carriage for a conversation. Spear said. Alright, but you don't need to call me Lord. Just use my name. Blaine responded. In that case, Mr. Blaine. Spear's tone remained respectful as she smiled. At her invitation, Blaine stepped into the carriage. Kurum and Chelsea also took their seats. So these two ladies are your companions as well? Trey asked. Blaine, Kurum, and Chelsea sat across from Tree and Spear in the somewhat cramped carriage. The three of them, and you. You're all Tegu users, aren't you? Tree asked Blaine. Blaine gave a slight nod, neither confirming nor denying it. As I thought. It seems the Prime Minister is truly determined to eliminate me, even going so far as to send 3 Tegu users after me. Tree sighed. Thank you all very much, but I heard those three address you as Lord Blaine. Are you their superior? Something like that, but I no longer hold any real position or power in the Imperial capital. Blaine replied. As for you, Trey, former Prime Minister, you're not traveling to the capital just for sightseeing, are you? No. I intend to fight that wicked Prime Minister to the very end. Trey admitted. Though, to be honest, it seems there aren't many left in the Imperial Army who are willing to stand with me. That's the harsh reality. Blaine said flatly. Aside from Great General Doe and the Imperial Guards under his command, most of the military is already under Prime Minister Honest's control. He continued, I suggest you turn back. While the Revolutionary Army does intend to protect those in the Conscience faction, if you set foot in the Imperial capital, Honest won't let you go. He may even use Asdeath's power against you. To be precise, Honest had already mobilized Asdeath. He was just having the three beasts handle things for now. The Revolutionary Army. You must be one of them, right? Tree immediately guessed upon hearing Blaine mention the group. No, but I'm working with them. Blaine said. In short, we're here to protect you, but we can't do so indefinitely. The safest option is for you to retrace your steps, remain in hiding, and wait for the right moment to act. I understand, but if possible, I still want to help. Tree said with a worried expression. If I can meet Great General Doe, I might be able to offer some assistance. After that, I'll return to hiding. Great General Doe, huh? That could work. Blaine nodded. We'll escort you to the Imperial capital and ensure you meet with him. For now, Doe remained an uncertain factor, one that would have to be dealt with sooner or later. Trey, as the most significant figure in the Conscience faction, might prove useful in handling the situation. I'm truly grateful. Tree said sincerely, lowering his head in thanks. If not for Blaine and his group, he would already be dead. I was too weak to protect my father. And now I've even burdened you, Mr. Blaine. Spear said, her voice filled with self-reproach. It's fine. You did your best, there's no need to blame yourself. Blaine reassured her. Spear nodded with a small smile, feeling a little better. Blaine's kindness and overwhelming strength gave her a strange feeling. After all, she was the daughter of a prime minister and had grown up in an entirely different world. During her father's tenure, the people around her had been deceitful, always scheming against one another. And after Honest seized her father's position, she had witnessed even darker things firsthand. Just then, Spear noticed the black-clad girl sitting next to Blaine. She had been watching her intently the entire time while munching on a bag of cookies. Her blank yet focused stare made Spear uneasy. Unable to ignore it, Spear glanced at Kurum with a puzzled expression. Before Spear could even ask, Kurum spoke up first, I'm not sharing with you. And that includes the cookies too. Chapter 126, Great General Doe. Spear was momentarily confused by Kurum's words. Only Chelsea immediately understood what Kurum meant. She also noticed that the atmosphere between Blaine and Spear just now had been a little delicate. Realizing she suddenly had another potential enemy. Chelsea let out a small sigh in her heart. After the failed attack by the three beasts, the caravan encountered no further threats on its way to the imperial capital. Of course, they had already been close to the city. When the carriage arrived at the city gates, the guards allowed it through immediately upon realizing it carried former Minister Tree. Although Honest and Tree were mortal enemies, Honest wouldn't dare to target Tree so openly in broad daylight. After all, Tree was under the protection of Great General Do, and Honest wasn't ready to break ties with him just yet. Instead, he would only go as far as sending assassins after Tree. This time, however, he had taken things a step further, pulling a dirty trick to completely sever the already tense relationship between Great General Do and Night Trade. As Tree's carriage slowly rolled into the capital, Liver, Nai-Ah, and Didara arrived before Asdeath. Lady Asdeath, we encountered Lord Blaine while attempting to assassinate Tree. Liver immediately dropped to one knee. Lord Blaine insisted on stopping us. After weighing our options, we decided to retreat. For now. Nai-Ah and Didara also knelt, holding their breath. They had failed their mission. Normally, failure meant severe punishment. Even if their reasoning was sound, it was impossible to predict whether Lady Asdeath would show mercy. Blaine appeared. Huh. It's fine. I won't blame you for this failure. Asdeath pardoned the three beasts. Upon hearing this, Nai-Ah and Didara finally let out a quiet sigh of relief. In that case, Blaine should be arriving in the imperial capital with Tree's caravan, right? Asdeath seemed particularly focused on Blaine. Most likely, but there's also a chance Tree will go into hiding to protect himself. Liver replied. Asdeath nodded slightly. The plan is cancelled. Now that the Prime Minister's scheme has been exposed, continuing with it would be meaningless. It would only serve to provoke Great General Do. Although she had always wanted to fight Do, at this moment, her priority was Blaine. She didn't want Do interfering. Yes. The three beasts responded in unison. Soon after, Tree, Blaine, and the others arrived at the royal palace. Tree requested an audience with Great General Do. For now, he had no intention nor the ability to confront Prime Minister Honest head-on, so he avoided the palace where Honest resided. Only Blaine, Tree, Kurum, Chelsea, and Spear entered the royal palace, while the rest of the guards waited outside. At this moment, they had already come face to face with Great General Do. The man standing before them was imposing, tall and muscular, with golden hair and a commanding presence. He was none other than Great General Do. He was clad in heavy armor, which was in fact the Tegu known as Thunder God's Rage, a Drumroll, an armor-type Tegu infused with the power of lightning. It seemed that elemental Tegus had particularly high potential, as Death's demon god's manifestation was also one, tied to ice. Great General Do was stationed at the royal palace almost daily, so finding him here wasn't difficult, but gaining an audience with him was another matter entirely. Tree, however, was not just anyone. As a former minister and Do's longest-serving colleague, their relationship was far from ordinary. "It's been a long time, Great General Do," Tree remarked. "Minister Tree, why have you suddenly returned to the imperial capital?" Do asked, clearly surprised. "I'm done hiding. I can't just stand by and watch that man destroy the empire," Tree said. "Besides, I'm not a minister anymore, just call me Tree. I'm well aware of Honest's corruption, but my family's ancestral teachings dictate that generals must not interfere in political affairs. Every great general before me has upheld this rule, and I won't be the one to break it," Do responded. This was why he had never acted against the rampant corruption within Honest's regime. "I understand your principles and your position, so I won't force you." Just as Tree was considering how to persuade Do to help, the general suddenly asked, "By the way, besides Spear, who are these three?" His sharp gaze landed on Blaine, Kurum, and Chelsea. Even though they had come with Tree and should be trustworthy, something about them put him on edge. "Ah, speaking of which, something happened on the way here. That Prime Minister sent 3 Tegu users to ambush us. If it weren't for Mr. Blaine, Spear and I would likely be dead right now," Tree said, bringing up the incident. 3 Tegu users. He actually went that far. Do's expression darkened. "I have heard rumors that some officials have been assassinated recently, but all the blame has been placed on the Night Trade rebels." "No, that's not the truth. The 3 Tegu users under Honest's orders are known as the 3 Beasts. Before coming after me, they had already eliminated several officials who held grudges against Honest while masquerading as Night Raid members," Tree said grimly. "If they had succeeded in killing me, the news would have surely reported it as Night Raid's doing." Upon hearing this, Do's eyes widened slightly. His already intimidating face now bore the terrifying expression of a wrathful guardian deity. Honest's actions had finally pushed him past his limit. For years, he had endured the Prime Minister's misdeeds, upholding his family's doctrine with sheer willpower. But this time, it was too much. A minister who acted with such reckless abandon wasn't just challenging Do's authority as great general, he was also undermining the very officials Do had sworn to protect. If this continued, the empire would spiral into ruin, its court overrun by nothing but honest's corrupt allies. Entry. Do trusted his words. I understand. I will personally eradicate the root of this nation's descent into darkness. However, the rebel army must also be eliminated. Do declared, his deep voice carrying unmistakable killing intent. Eliminating Prime Minister Honest should take priority over the rebels. Otherwise, you'll risk being attacked from both sides. At the very least, we know the rebels won't cooperate with the Prime Minister, but he won't hesitate to use them for his schemes. Blaine said, his tone calm and measured. Chapter 127, Asdeath's new ability. You're right. We should be wary of that Prime Minister. Great General Do nodded slightly. Due to a series of changes, his thoughts differed greatly from those in the original story. For instance, in the original, Do had no idea that the so-called night raid responsible for assassinating Tree and the others was actually the three beasts in disguise. This misunderstanding only deepened his hatred for night raid. So even when he eventually lost patience with Honest, his priority remained wiping out the rebels first before personally eliminating the Prime Minister and other internal threats. But in the end, before he ever got the chance, he fell at the hands of night raid. By the way, I feel like I've heard your name somewhere before. Do suddenly asked. The name Blaine seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite recall where he'd heard it. Maybe because I've held some minor yet somewhat well-known positions in the past. Blaine answered casually. He didn't mention Akatsuki, nor did he bring up night raid. With someone as stubborn as Do, mentioning either would only backfire. To him, cooperating with the Revolutionary Army, essentially rebels, was utterly unacceptable. As a general, he couldn't tolerate those trying to overthrow the empire right under his nose. Chelsea also understood this to some extent, which was why she refrained from revealing her identity in front of Do. Trusting Tree's judgment, Do no longer doubted the identities of the three. After a brief exchange, Blaine and Do reached a tentative cooperation. However, when it comes to Asdeath, I want to handle this myself. Blaine stated his condition. No problem, as long as you can deal with her. Do agreed with a nod. Hearing this, Kuro puffed her cheeks slightly. The commander sure seems concerned about Asdeath. Tree and Spear were temporarily staying at the general's mansion under the protection of Great General Do. For now, their safety wasn't much of a concern. No matter how bold Prime Minister Honest was, he wouldn't dare send people to storm Do's residence directly. Meanwhile, with the three beasts halting their operations, Akame and the others found themselves with unexpected free time. Of course, having a bit of peace wasn't a bad thing. It meant they weren't in immediate danger. The three beasts haven't made any moves since then, and Akame's group hasn't been attacked either. Chelsea remarked. It could just be the calm before the storm. Blaine said in a low voice. The recent silence from the three beasts made sense. Tree had survived, and from Honest's perspective, Do was an unpredictable factor. Naturally, that meant he wouldn't act recklessly. Aren't the three beasts under Asdeath's command? Some of our people have been keeping an eye on her mansion, but it seems like she hasn't left her residence much these past few days. Chelsea noted. That is suspicious. I'm planning to go see her. You guys stay here at the mansion for now. Blaine said. You're going to see her alone? You know, I can't help but feel like you care a lot about General Asdeath. Chelsea observed keenly. Do I? Maybe it's because I still owe her a favor. Blaine replied. He had yet to fully repay that debt. He had agreed to be Asdeath's short-term lover, only to disappear less than a day later. When he left, he had told her he'd return. He wasn't the type to break his word. And now, it was time to settle things with Asdeath once and for all. Oh, Chelsea stared straight into Blaine's eyes, as if trying to read him completely. All right, I'll wait for you here. But be careful, she said, dropping the matter despite her suspicions. Standing nearby, Kiram looked like she wanted to say something but ultimately remained silent. Blaine gave a brief nod before heading off to Asdeath's mansion. After he left, Chelsea found herself feeling a bit bored. Her gaze shifted to Kiram. Kiram, do you have someone you like? She asked casually, though there was clear intent behind her words. Yes. Kiram answered calmly and without hesitation. Eh? Who is it? Don't tell me it's Blaine? Chelsea pressed. That's right. I like the commander. Why? Kiram responded just as directly, showing no trace of embarrassment. Chelsea blinked in surprise. She had expected Kiram to at least be a little flustered, but instead, she was completely straightforward. So, you actually like him too, don't you? Kiram countered. Chelsea was caught off guard for a moment, then let out a small, amused laugh. Looks like you turned the tables on me. Yeah, I'm interested in him too. I guess that makes us rivals. However, Due to Asdith's involvement, Kiram wasn't particularly concerned about this. She simply shook her head. There's a bigger problem. You probably don't know this yet, but word has already spread across the imperial capital Asdith and the commander are lovers. Chelsea genuinely hadn't heard about this. Night Raid didn't have spies in the capital, and aside from Leon, who occasionally roamed the city for fun, the rest of the team rarely set foot there. Coincidentally, Leon hadn't been around that day, leaving Night Raid completely unaware of the situation. He and Asdith are together? No wonder he seemed so invested in her affairs. Chelsea muttered, momentarily stunned. She had been confident in her chances only to find that, in the blink of an eye, Blaine had become Asdith's lover. It had happened so suddenly that she hadn't even seen it coming. So, you really didn't know until now? Kiram remarked. In that case, I can't just sit around doing nothing. Chelsea declared, unable to stay still any longer. Let's go take a walk around the city. And, well, maybe we'll just happen to end up near Asdith's place. Completely by accident, of course. Imperial capital Asdith's mansion. This ability is finally perfected. Now I just need a test subject. Who should I pick? If only Blaine would show up on his own. Asdith muttered to herself. She could already feel that she had fully mastered her new power. She had spent the past few days secluded in her mansion, focused entirely on refining this ability, which she had named Mahapdama. She had considered other names but ultimately settled on this one. And just as she spoke of him, as if summoned by fate, Blaine arrived at the entrance of her mansion. Chapter 128, Final Battle with Asdith, First Appearance of Susanoo. I can't believe you actually came back. Asdith was visibly surprised when she saw Blaine suddenly appear before her. She had assumed he would never return, especially after what happened with Tree. Didn't I say last time? I was only leaving temporarily. I don't go back on my word. Blaine said calmly. So you did all those good deeds just to sabotage our plans? Despite her words, Asdith showed no anger or blame. I had no choice. Besides, I already told you we're on opposing sides now. Blaine replied with a hint of helplessness. Even though there had been some unpleasant incidents between them, the atmosphere of their reunion remained oddly harmonious. So, why not join me? You and your subordinates, your friends, if they come to my side, everything from the past can be erased. As she spoke, Asdith gave an example. Liver, Naya, and Didara all committed crimes of varying degrees, but now it's as if none of it ever happened. Blaine shook his head slightly. That's something I should be saying to you. Asdith wasn't surprised by his response. If that's how it is, then we'll have to settle this through battle. Blaine got straight to the point. You once said that if I proved stronger than you, you'd obey me, right? That's right. Are you saying you want to fight me? Asdith was momentarily taken aback. Was he underestimating her? Or was he truly confident he could defeat her? Yes. If I win, you'll follow my will. Blaine spoke indifferently, but before he could finish, Asdith cut in. Fine. But if you lose, you'll stay by my side forever and never disobey my orders. Of course, I'll be considerate of your feelings and won't give you any unreasonable commands. Alright, let's do it now. Find a suitable place. We can't just start a fight in the middle of the Imperial capital. Blaine said seriously. I don't mind. Asdith responded casually. After all, she was the kind of woman who could bring ruin to the entire empire without hesitation. As long as we stay away from the capital. Blaine quickly recalled a remote, uninhabited area, one of many places where danger beasts roamed. Let's go. Asdith walked up and grabbed Blaine's hand, pulling him along as she left the mansion. She couldn't wait to defeat him and take full control. Though she had a habit of tormenting her enemies, she would never do the same to Blaine. She simply wouldn't bear it. With a bright smile, Asdith led Blaine down the street. To outsiders, they looked like any ordinary couple. No one would have guessed they were on their way to a duel. From the shadows, Kiram and Chelsea, who had been secretly watching, were the first to notice Blaine and Asdith leaving the villa. As top-tier assassins, they had positioned themselves in Blaine's blind spot, carefully suppressing their presence. Even Blaine and Asdith wouldn't easily detect them. I thought he went to see Asdith for something important. Turns out it was a date. Seeing the scene before her, Chelsea muttered in a low voice, seriously? He left us at the general's estate just to sneak off for a private date with Asdith? Yes. The commander is really mean. Kiram added with a faintly gloomy tone. But if you think about it, Blaine was probably worried we'd end up clashing with Asdith. I've heard about her personality. If she met us and found out who we were, she'd probably attack us on the spot. Chelsea could understand Blaine's reasoning. With that, she and Kiram continued tailing Blaine and Asdith. Within the Imperial capital, the abundance of buildings, cover, and the general noise of the city made it easier for them to stay hidden. But once outside the city, things were different. The slightest rustle or disturbance could easily give them away. Even so, They still decided to follow and see what would happen. Sure enough, not long after leaving the capital, Asdith had already sensed something. Seems like we're being followed. Are they your companions? She asked Blaine casually. She had detected their presence but wasn't sure of their exact location or identity. Probably. I'll tell them not to interfere in our duel. Blaine replied. By now, he had also realized there were two people tailing them. It wasn't hard to guess it had to be Kurum and Chelsea. They. Asdith picked up on his choice of words. After all, there was a clear difference in pronunciation between they when referring to a mixed group and they when referring specifically to women. A sinister smile crept across her face, twisted yet alluring in its own way. No problem. If they want to join in, they're welcome. I'll make sure they understand exactly who you belong to. Blaine broke into a cold sweat. Just from her expression and tone, he could already tell what she was implying. He'd need to warn Kurum and Chelsea not to do anything reckless. A few kilometers outside the capital, Blaine finally stopped in a vast forested area. The frequent presence of danger beasts here meant there were no human settlements nearby. This is the place. After putting some distance between himself and Asdith, Blaine quickly scanned his surroundings. With the naked eye, it was nearly impossible to spot Kurum and Chelsea. His Mangekyo Sharingan granted him exceptional perception, but it didn't allow him to see through objects. If they had deliberately hidden behind cover, tracking them down wouldn't be easy. So instead, he raised his voice and called out, I know you've been following me this whole time. I'm about to duel Asdith, so stay out of it. Do not interfere under any circumstances. He stressed the last part firmly. After all, he had never personally seen Asdith go all out. If she lost control, he couldn't guarantee he'd be able to protect both Kurum and Chelsea at the same time. To be safe, he needed them to stay out of it. From the shadows, Kurum and Chelsea remained silent, but in their hearts, they acknowledged his warning. That being said, if Blaine's life was in danger, they weren't about to just sit back and watch. That's no fun. Why don't you let them come out and introduce themselves? Asdith smiled, but there was a dangerous edge hidden beneath her casual tone. It's for fairness, of course. This is a one-on-one duel. Blaine replied casually. Asdith snorted softly, a confident and arrogant smile appearing on her face. Then you go first. Blaine didn't respond. Instead, he immediately entered combat mode, allocating his available system points. Ding. The host has exchanged Constitution 165. Deducting system points 165 inches, ding. The host has exchanged Ocular Power 80. Deducting system points 100 inches, ding. The host has exchanged Strength 50. Deducting system points 80 inches, ding. The host has exchanged Agility 50. Deducting system points 80 inches. It had been quite a while since his last point allocation. Over the past few days, Blaine had been accumulating system points but hadn't felt the need to spend them until today. Now, facing the Empire's strongest warrior, Asdith, he decided to hold nothing back. Not only that, but he also used his will to don the white mask, allowing him to wield the Gunbai Akaiwa. The mask's additional +10 boost to all attributes might not be much, but every bit helped. Strength, 150, +10, Agility, 150, +10, Constitution, 350, +10, Ocular Power, +130, with his attributes nearly doubled. Blaine made it clear that he wasn't underestimating Asdith in the slightest. Another new Tegu? Asdith's sharp gaze immediately locked onto the massive flaming fan in Blaine's hand. Are you using two Tegus at once? A flicker of concern crossed her eyes. She was well aware of the dangers of dual-wielding Tegu. While it would temporarily enhance Blaine's strength and make the battle even more exhilarating for her, she didn't want him harming himself in the process. Blaine didn't answer. Instead, he vanished in an instant, using spatial teleportation to appear directly in front of Asdith. At such close range, he activated Kamui, attempting to drag her into its dimension. With both eyes unlocked, Kamui's spatial distortion was significantly faster than before. Since Asdith had never seen him use this ability, he was counting on catching her off guard. Had it been anyone else, they would have been sucked into Kamui before they even realized what was happening. But Asdith was no ordinary opponent. She didn't know what kind of ability this was, but the moment Blaine teleported right in front of her, her expression turned serious, and her cold eyes filled with wariness. She could feel space distorting around her. Even though it was only for a fleeting moment, her instincts screamed danger. Without hesitation, Asdith forcefully retreated, but she wasn't sure if she was fast enough, so she launched an ice bomb at Blaine, using the recoil to propel herself backward. Ugh! Kaya return. Blaine swiftly swung the Gunbai Akaiwa, absorbing the ice bomb before converting its energy into a powerful gust of wind that he redirected toward Asdith. The sudden blast threw Asdith off balance. Blaine took the opportunity to teleport behind her. Realizing that the Blaine in front of her had vanished, Asdeath immediately deduced that he was either above or behind her. She ruled out the air as the lesser threat and, without hesitation, spun around, reaching back in an attempt to grab him. If she caught him, she could freeze him instantly with her Tigu's power. Unfortunately, against the Mangekyo Sharingan, her movement was too predictable. Blaine activated intangibility, allowing her hand to pass right through him. Feeling nothing, Asdeath wasn't surprised. She already knew Blaine had this ability. Rather than panic, she remained composed, swiftly creating distance between them once more. What a thrill. It's been so long since I've had such an exhilarating fight. Even though she was clearly at a disadvantage, Asdeath looked absolutely delighted. After just a single exchange, her perception of Blaine's strength had completely changed. He was even stronger than she had initially imagined, which only made her more excited. Since obtaining her Tigu, she had never faced such an evenly matched battle. The stronger the opponent, the more exhilarated she became, especially when that opponent was her man. Blaine, on the other hand, wasn't one to talk much during battle. Asdeath's strength was exactly as he had expected. As the Empire's strongest, she was not someone who could be taken down easily. Though double Kamui's spatial teleportation was fast, it was difficult to make full use of it against someone like Asdeath, whose reflexes and speed were at the absolute peak. Blaine realized that relying solely on his basic spatial abilities wouldn't be enough, at least, not if he wanted to end this fight quickly. Which meant it was time to use Susanoo. The ultimate power of the Mangekyo Sharingan, one that could overwhelm Asdeath with sheer force. Thanks to his earlier stat boosts, Blaine felt that he could now barely handle using Susanoo. He had always known he was capable of activating it, but he had hesitated before, worried that the strain would be too much for his body. Susanoo. With just a thought, Blaine activated it. His Susanoo naturally shared the same sky blue hue as Kakashi's and had a similar appearance. However, unlike Kakashi, who could summon the complete form immediately, Blaine wasn't yet capable of fully manifesting it. His current constitution and ocular power weren't high enough, and he hadn't awakened the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He started with Susanoo's initial form, where giant spectral ribs wrapped around his body, glowing a deep azure. A strange, eerie sound filled the air as the skeletal structure materialized. But it didn't stop there. Susanoo rapidly grew, and in the blink of an eye, it advanced to its first stage, a towering skeletal upper body that reached nearly 10 meters in height. The ominous spectacle instantly put Asdeath on high alert. Chapter 129, Susanoo's second form. Although Susanoo isn't as broken as double Kamui's spatial abilities, it possesses absolute power and absolute defense. If the body can withstand its immense energy drain, then Susanoo is undoubtedly the best choice for a head-on confrontation. Susanoo works by consuming dojutsu and materializing chakra into a tangible form, which usually results in excruciating pain throughout the body. However, since Blaine had no chakra, his Susanoo was bound to be a modified version, one that likely relied on his constitution to sustain it. Currently, his constitution was over 30 times that of an ordinary person, but whether it was enough to handle the energy drain of Susanoo's second form remained uncertain. To play it safe, he kept Susanoo in its first form for now. If that wasn't enough, he could always push it further, simple as that. So, you have this kind of ability? A Tigu in the form of armor? Just how many powers do you have? You never fail to surprise me. Faced with the overwhelming presence of Blaine, Asdeath was both on guard and genuinely excited. Meanwhile, hiding in the shadows, Kurom and Chelsea were also witnessing this ability of Blaine's for the first time. A Tigu that grants this kind of power. It's kinda similar to Bullet's demon armor. But no, Bullet's wasn't this massive. I've never seen the commander use this before. Could it be that he's already developed his Tigu to its absolute limit? Chelsea and Kurom were stunned. Blaine simply had too many abilities. If not for the Tigu iron rule, they might have suspected that he was using multiple Tigus at once. After all, wielding 2 Tigas simultaneously was already a violation of the rule, and doing so inflicted serious harm on the body. Without hesitation, Blaine controlled Susanoo's massive right hand to grab Asdeath. Despite its towering size, Susanoo was anything but sluggish. It moved with remarkable speed. Seeing that dodging was nearly impossible, Asdeath decided not to evade. Instead, she attempted to freeze Blaine completely. When her hand touched Susanoo, a thick layer of ice immediately formed over its surface. However, it had absolutely no effect on Blaine inside. And in the next instant, Blaine simply willed Susanoo to shatter the ice with ease. Realizing that her freezing abilities were completely ineffective, Asdeath immediately decided to go all out. Raising her hand, she summoned a massive block of ice from the sky, a frozen boulder the size of a small meteorite, easily over 100 meters in diameter. Under her command, it plummeted toward Blaine with terrifying force. Blaine lifted Susanoo's arms to block the incoming attack. Boom! The massive ice boulder crashed into Susanoo, creating an earth-shaking impact. The sheer force of the collision sent shockwaves rippling outward, toppling countless trees in the area. Shards of ice rained down, covering the ground, while dust and mist filled the air. For a moment, visibility was completely obscured. But when the dust finally settled, Blaine's Susanoo stood tall, completely intact. It had tanked Asdith's attack head-on, suffering only a few minor cracks on its outer shell. This was the overwhelming power of Susanoo, while double Kamui had its game-breaking instant kill mechanics. When it came to sheer brute force, Susanoo was the superior choice. Its absolute defense was nearly unbeatable in this world. And unlike intangibility, which prevented him from attacking while phasing, Susanoo allowed him to both defend and strike at the same time. That's impressive. Seeing this, Asdith couldn't help but remark, then how about one even bigger? Maybe that will have some effect? Before she even finished speaking, another ice meteor, twice the size of the previous one, formed in the clouds. Kurom and Chelsea saw this and quickly stepped back to avoid being caught in the impact. I think the commander should be fine. He should be fine. If Blaine's life is in danger, I will definitely stop Asdith and if possible, kill her. Chelsea's eyes hardened as she spoke. After fighting Blaine, Asdith should be at her weakest. Not only was this an opportunity to eliminate the strongest force of Honest's regime, but also a chance to protect Blaine. She would do whatever it took. Only after saying it did Chelsea realize how aggressive she had become. If this were the old her, she would never have taken such a risk without absolute certainty. This is because of Blaine, isn't it? I will save the commander too. Kurom nodded, her resolve firm. She held in her arms a medicine with the most potent effect. Though the commander had warned her against taking such medicine lightly, if the moment called for it, she wouldn't hesitate. As the ice meteor hurtled toward Blaine, Asdith conjured countless ice spears, hovering behind her like the king's treasure. Then launched them at a single weak point on Susanoo, aiming to break through. She refused to believe Blaine's ability was truly indestructible. The ice meteor and countless spears struck at once, and the first form of Susanoo was already struggling to hold out. Blaine could see more and more cracks forming across its surface. It wouldn't last much longer. After all, this was only its first form. Each transformation had vastly different levels of offense and defense. Since maintaining the first form didn't put much strain on him, he was just about to transition into the second form when Asdith suddenly halted her attack. After enduring the relentless assault of the ice meteor and spears, Susanoo looked as if it were on the verge of collapse. Of course, this was just an illusion. With a single thought, Blaine could advance to the second form, greatly enhancing both his attack and defense. But for Asdith to stop now, it was odd. A smirk played at her lips. Mahapadma. Without warning, she activated her ultimate technique. Although she had many more techniques at her disposal, she knew none of them would be particularly effective against Blaine. In an instant, she froze. The entire space-time itself came to a halt. Blaine could clearly feel time and space freezing around him, leaving him completely immobile. But he quickly realized this wasn't absolute freezing. Rather, Asdith had slowed down the flow of time and space in the surrounding area by an immeasurable degree. Otherwise, Tatsumi's demon armor in the original story wouldn't have been able to adapt to Asdith's Mahapadma. Absolute freezing couldn't be countered, only relative freezing could. Understanding this, Blaine immediately attempted to use intangibility. However, because time and space had been slowed to an extreme degree, Asdith had already exploited a gap in the weakened first form of Susanoo and was now closing in. She intended to end the fight with her sword tip at Blaine's throat. She couldn't bring herself to actually kill him. But at that crucial moment, Blaine finally succeeded in activating intangibility. The ability instantly shattered Asdith's Mahapadma, allowing Blaine to move freely even within the frozen space-time. Without hesitation, he escaped from Mahapadma's range at full speed and immediately activated Susanoo's second form. Chapter 130, A Forceful Kiss for Blaine. This is the first kiss. Since the first form wasn't enough, the second form would decide the outcome. In an instant, Susanoo grew into its second form. The skeletal upper body of the first form was now covered in flesh and draped in armor, marking a massive transformation in its defensive power. Its size expanded to over 10 meters. Not only that, but the second form of Susanoo came with its own exclusive weapon. Blaine took note of his weapon, a massive Ecchi. Despite its enormous size, it looked perfectly suited to Susanoo's proportions. The surface of the blade was enveloped in a sky blue flame-like aura. The commander's got an even bigger one now. And it has a weapon. And was that just Asdith's power? It felt like space and even time completely stopped. It must have been Asdith. I can't believe Blaine managed to break free. Kurom and Chelsea had kept their distance and were unaffected by Mahapadma. But the moment they saw Blaine frozen in place, they knew something was wrong. At that moment, Asdith's eyes widened in shock. Blaine had actually escaped from her Mahapadma barrier. The technique's duration hadn't even ended yet, but Blaine had already decided to cut through the barrier itself, ensuring Asdith's complete defeat. With a single thought, he used his enchantment ability once more, this time channeling the power of Kamui into his Techie, granting it the ability to tear through space. Then, with a single slash, the Techie now imbued with Kamui's power effortlessly sliced through Mahapadma's barrier. As the massive blade came down toward Esdeath, Blaine stopped it just millimeters from her. "You've lost," he said flatly. Esdeath's stunned expression gradually softened into a calm, knowing smile. "Yes. You've won." She understood all too well if that strike had landed, she would have died instantly. There was no point in continuing the fight. But Blaine hadn't struck the final blow. That alone convinced her he truly loved her, didn't he? Ding. The host has defeated the Empire's strongest, Esdeath. And received a reward, 100 system points. Simply defeating Esdeath had earned Blaine a full 100 system points. Until now, he had always needed to kill his opponents to gain points. This alone spoke to how unique and powerful Esdeath was. Esdeath put away her weapon and slowly walked toward Blaine. Blaine had already deactivated Susanoo and was checking his physical condition when without warning, Esdeath reached out, gently pinched Blaine's chin, and pulled him into a forceful kiss. If she had shown any hostility, Blaine would have used intangibility to evade immediately. Instead, he felt a cool, soft sensation press against his lips. It was the first time in his life he had ever kissed a girl. And Esdeath had stolen that first kiss. Not far away, Kiram and Chelsea stood frozen in shock. Their eyes trembled as they watched the scene unfold before them. Blaine just got kissed by Esdeath. Just moments ago, they were locked in a brutal battle, and now, the moment it ended. This happened? Blaine instinctively tried to step back, but sensing his retreat, Esdeath wrapped her arms around him, refusing to let go. However, Blaine quickly phased through her grasp using intangibility and slipped away. Even so, Esdeath was already satisfied. A knowing, playful smile lingered on her lips. As their lips parted, Esdeath looked at Blaine and asked, "Was that your first kiss?" "Yes." Blaine nodded, unable to deny it. "Mine too. And besides, this is a reward for the victor." A smirk curled at the corner of Esdeath's lips. Upon learning that she was Blaine's first kiss, her smile deepened with amusement and a hint of satisfaction. Clearly, her actions just now had some underlying intent. Despite suffering a decisive defeat, Esdeath showed not the slightest trace of disappointment. To her, whether she won or lost this duel, the outcome wasn't bad at all. If she had won, that would have been ideal. Not only would she have made Blaine hers, but she could have completely dominated him. Even in defeat, it wasn't a loss. Instead, it confirmed that Blaine was stronger than her. She had always been known as the Empire's strongest, perhaps even the strongest in the world. Now, the man who defeated her, Blaine, was undeniably the world's strongest. And to Esdeath, having the strongest man as her own was just as satisfying. Not to mention, from now on, she would never lack a worthy opponent she could challenge Blaine for sparring any time she wanted. As for that kiss, she called it a reward, but in truth, it was more of a warning to the others Blaine had mentioned. They were all watching from the shadows, and she took this opportunity to declare her claim. To make it unmistakably clear who Blaine belonged to. And it worked perfectly. Kiram and Chelsea, who had been hidden nearby, were visibly shaken. Their emotions flared so intensely that even their presence could no longer remain concealed. Esdeath could now sense their exact locations with ease. Anyway, the battle is over. Blaine let out a deep breath. It had ended just right. Neither of them was seriously injured. From the start, he had no intention of killing Esdeath, which was why he had deliberately held back, such as not using his left eye's offensive Kamui ability. Although Esdeath's reaction speed was incredible, making it difficult to land a direct Kamui attack on her, no one could dodge forever. In a prolonged battle, exhaustion would eventually slow her down, and she wouldn't be able to avoid getting caught in Kamui's spatial distortions. But that approach was inefficient. He would have had to wait until she wore herself out. Instead, he opted for Susanoo, a far more efficient option that wasn't necessarily lethal and also allowed him to gauge its energy consumption. So far, the first form of Susanoo hadn't put much strain on him. While it caused some pain, it was tolerable, and he suspected that as his constitution and ocular power improved, the discomfort would gradually lessen. The second form, however, was far more taxing, though still within his limits. It was the perfect balance: strong defense, exclusive weaponry, and sufficient power to win the fight. After this battle with Esdeath, Blaine had exhausted most of his energy. He would need at least 2 days of rest to fully recover. "By the way, since I won," then before Blaine could finish his sentence, Esdeath nodded without hesitation and said, "Then from now on, I will obey your every command completely. Whether it's killing Prime Minister Honest or becoming your slave, I am yours to command." Chapter 131, Subjugating Esdeath. Being a slave isn't necessary. Just join my organization. If you're looking for a fight, once Honest falls, the foreign nations will likely start stirring as well. Blaine knew how much Edith loved battle, so he considered her feelings just as she had considered his. From an outsider's perspective, the fall of Prime Minister Honest would throw the Empire into chaos. With the inevitable clash between the Akatsuki organization and the Revolutionary Army, it was highly likely that the ever-hostile foreign nations would take advantage of the situation. Battle, huh? Compared to those weaklings who can't even put up a decent fight, I'd much rather fight you. You're the only one who can truly satisfy me. Edith spoke bluntly. Is that so? Well, whenever you feel like it, I don't mind sparring with you. Excellent. With that, Edith officially stood on the same side as Blaine. As for Honest, his life or death was of no concern to her. The only reason she had worked with him in the first place was for the opportunity to fight freely and, when the time was right, to challenge General Doe. But now, with Blaine proving himself even stronger than her, the benefits Honest had once provided meant little. Just then, Edith's sharp gaze suddenly shifted in a particular direction. By the way, why don't those two come out now? I'd like to get to know them. Kurum and Chelsea, hidden in the shadows, immediately realized that Edith had pinpointed their location. Seeing no reason to keep hiding, they calmly stepped forward. When Edith saw them, a glint flickered in her eyes. She vaguely remembered Kurum, having seen her before at the Empire's assassination unit base. However, Chelsea was unfamiliar. I remember you, Kurum, right? And the other one as well. Are you both Blaine's subordinates? Edith asked. Not really. If you have to put it that way, I'd say he's more like my owner. Wouldn't you agree, Blaine? Chelsea grinned playfully. She was, of course, referring to the time she had disguised herself as a small black cat when Blaine had quite literally been her owner. Blaine instantly realized what Chelsea was implying. Edith raised an eyebrow, looking at Blaine with mild surprise. So, you have that kind of hobby? I didn't take you for the type. Clearly, she had misunderstood and thought this was something more unconventional. For the first time, she saw a side of Blaine that aligned with her own sadistic tendencies. No, you've got it all wrong. Remember the little black cat I was carrying back then? That was actually Chelsea. Blaine quickly explained, eager to clear up the misunderstanding. Oh, I see. Edith nodded in understanding. Though both Edith and Chelsea still wore smiles, the atmosphere between them felt oddly tense, like an unspoken rivalry had begun to take shape. I'm also very close to the commander. At that moment, Kurum stepped forward, joining Chelsea's side. To her, Edith was now a formidable opponent not in battle, but in something else entirely. After all, they had let their guard down for just a moment. And Edith had stolen Blaine's first kiss. I see. Edith gave a small nod. Well then, let's all get along. But let me make one thing clear, Blaine is already mine. Though her tone remained calm, there was an undeniable dominance in her words, one that allowed no room for argument. I'm not anyone's possession. I belong to myself. Blaine sighed, slightly exasperated. Besides, this isn't the time for this conversation. Once we return, we need to prepare. Honest is next. With that, Blaine brought the discussion back on track. The biggest threat, Edith, had not only been neutralized but had even joined his side. While he couldn't guarantee she would follow his every command, he was confident that he could keep her in check. Whether she would truly listen, that remained to be seen. Blaine, Edith, Kurum, and Chelsea set off for the Imperial capital. By the way, I recently had Honest prepare 6 Tegu users for me. Should we kill them along the way, or try to make them submit? If we want them to surrender, it might take some effort. As they walked, Edith casually brought up the matter of the Jaggers. She had personally named them. If we don't have to kill them, then let's avoid it. Blaine replied. Strengthening the Akatsuki organization would only work to their advantage. After all, Honest wasn't the only threat. The Revolutionary Army was arguably an even bigger problem, and on top of that, the foreign nations posed a looming danger as well. Understood. Then I'll handle them the same way I did with the 3 beasts. Edith responded indifferently. The 3 beasts had already become her personal forces, loyal only to her and completely disregarding Honest's orders. She had ways to make the new Tegu users fall in line. It would just take a little more effort. After returning to the Imperial capital, Blaine and the others first encountered the 3 beasts. Seeing Lady Edith and Lord Blaine walking together again, the 3 beasts were visibly surprised. Lady Edith, Lord Blaine. The trio knelt on one knee, showing deep respect. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel confused. After everything that had happened, how could Lady Edith still be so casually getting along with Lord Blaine? They also recognized Kurum and Chelsea. The last time they had failed in their mission to assassinate the former Prime Minister Tree, these 2 girls had also been part of the convoy. Perfect timing. I have an announcement for you. From now on, Blaine is officially your superior. And mine as well. Edith spoke nonchalantly. Status had never mattered to her, just as she had never minded kneeling before the young emperor when necessary. The three of them were momentarily at a loss. I lost. Blaine is stronger than me. According to our agreement, I am no longer a general of the Empire. Asdith stated it plainly. She left the three beasts with no choice, either they followed her, or they died. It was that simple. From Blaine's standpoint, she would rather eliminate them than leave behind three potential risks. The moment Asdith admitted defeat, the three were utterly stunned. They couldn't fathom the idea of the invincible Lady Asdith losing to Lord Blaine. But they understood her meaning immediately, and without hesitation, they swore their loyalty. We will always follow Lady Asdith. No matter what, we will always be Lady Asdith's faithful hounds. And of course, Lord Blaine as well. Chapter 132, A Soul-Crushing Humiliation. Asdith was not at all surprised by the three beasts' response. Their loyalty had been tested countless times, and given the personalities and past experiences of Liver, Nai-Ah, and Daidara, betrayal was never an option for them. Liver, for instance, had once been a general of the Empire before being persecuted by Prime Minister Honest. He had long lost faith in the Empire, and when Asdith rescued him from prison, he swore to follow only her. To him, whether Asdith sided with the Empire or the Revolutionary Army made no difference. This corrupt empire held no meaning for him anymore. As for Nai-Ah and Daidara, one was a sadist, the other a bloodthirsty killer. Neither cared whether the Empire thrived or collapsed. They would follow Asdith's orders without question. Good. For now, there are no assignments for you, but stay put and be ready to act at any time. Asdith nodded in satisfaction. Yes. The three beasts responded in unison. By the way, does this mean we're now part of the Revolutionary Army? Nai-Ah asked curiously. Though it seemed likely, he wanted confirmation. Clearly, the three beasts had always assumed Blaine was aligned with the Revolutionary Army. Not exactly. Blaine intends to change the Empire from within. His goals are very different from theirs. Asdith clarified. That's right. The plan is to overthrow the true culprit, Prime Minister Honest, and rebuild the Empire. Blaine added. Even though Chelsea, a member of the Revolutionary Army, stood beside him, he spoke openly. There was no reason to hide it. He had already made his stance clear to Nitrade long ago. Oh, that sounds great. Nai-Ah nodded approvingly. Of course, he was just putting on a show. He didn't care whether the Prime Minister lived or died. As long as he played along and followed orders, that was enough. Daidara, seeing Nai-Ah's reaction, followed suit and praised the plan as well. Only Liver seemed genuinely moved. After all, the Empire's corruption was something he had long despised. If change was truly possible, it would be a step in the right direction. The three beasts withdrew. Once they were far enough away, Nai-Ah finally broke the silence. I never thought Lady Asdith would actually lose to Lord Blaine. I always felt that Lord Blaine's strength was immeasurable. But to think even Lady Asdith couldn't defeat him. Liver sighed. It turns out our choice back then was the right one. If we had stayed and fought Lord Blaine, we'd all be dead by now. Yeah, we really dodged a bullet. Daidara shuddered at the thought. After the three beasts left, Asdith began sharing the intelligence she had gathered, offering Blaine strategic advice. She pointed out which officials needed to be eliminated and mentioned the 4 Rakshasa demons who served as Prime Minister Honest's personal guards. Honest possesses a special Tegu, though its exact abilities remain unknown. As for the 4 Rakshasa demons, they are the strongest warriors trained at the Imperial Fist Temple, each with the power of a Tegu user. Asdith explained. But honestly, with our combined strength, storming the royal palace head-on wouldn't be an issue, though it does come with considerable risk. Asdith was eager for battle, but she wasn't reckless. Just as in the original events, when dealing with Night Raid, she hadn't simply charged into their base to fight them all at once. Instead, she had formed the Jaggers as a counterforce. It wasn't until the final battle, when the capital was under siege, that she had been forced to take on the Revolutionary Army's 100,000 strong force alone. Even so, if Blaine decided on a direct assault, Asdith would follow without hesitation. No, as you said, Honest has a special Tegu. It's better to take them down one by one. Blaine replied firmly. Tegu abilities were unpredictable, and acting without enough information was dangerous. Even in his battle with Asdith, where he had been certain of his victory, he had nearly been caught off guard by her newly developed ability, Mahapadma. His win had been far from easy. If Honest also possessed an unexpected ability, things could turn problematic. Well then, do you want me to use my position as an Imperial General to infiltrate the palace and kill him? Asdith suggested. As of now, Honest was unaware that she had sided with Blaine. Using his trust in her, she could easily find an opportunity to eliminate him. No, that would put you at too much risk. There's no need to rush a guaranteed victory. Blaine remained cautious. And in truth, His caution was justified because Honest's Tegu had the ability to instantly destroy other Tegu. Even if Asdith managed to kill him, she would be struck by his Tegu's effect. Without Demon's Extract, no matter how strong her close combat skills were, she wouldn't be able to fend off the multiple Tegu users stationed at the palace. In that scenario, escaping from the most heavily guarded place in the Empire would be near impossible. Of course, Blaine didn't know this. He simply saw no reason to gamble when the victory was already assured. With General Bdo now his ally and Asdith on his side, as long as he didn't make any reckless mistakes, he couldn't see how he could lose. Alright. Feeling Blaine's concern for her, Asdith's heart warmed, and a happy smile spread across her face, accompanied by a faint blush. Watching the subtle atmosphere between Blaine and Asdith, Kiram suddenly felt displeased. Her expression soured as jealousy flared within her. Without hesitation, she stepped between them, physically separating the two. Asdith blinked in surprise, then smirked. Compared to Kiram, she was far more composed and confident. Rather than getting upset, she casually reached out, grabbed Blaine's face, and despite Kiram being in the middle tilted his head toward her. Then, standing on her toes, she leaned in to kiss him over Kiram's head. Since both Blaine and Asdith were tall enough, she could actually pull this off. Oh dear, watching this unfold, Chelsea didn't react much at first. But then, she couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for little Kiram. Due to her shorter height, her face was now pressed directly against Asdith's chest. Asdith was simply too well endowed, and Kiram's entire face was practically buried in her cleavage. Considering the stark contrast in their physiques, this was nothing short of a humiliating defeat. Chapter 133, The Unyielding Kiram. In every sense, this situation was bound to be unpleasant for any girl. Kiram's face darkened as she forcefully pushed Asdith away. She had been squeezed so tightly just now that she could barely breathe. Because of Kiram's push, Asdith failed to kiss Blaine. "Can you not interfere when I'm getting close to Blaine?" Asdith asked with a pleasant smile, her tone seemingly friendly. In truth, she hadn't entirely meant for things to play out that way. The only part she did intentionally was attempting to kiss Blaine past Kiram. However, making Kiram suffocate in the process had been unintentional, though it ended up being the most effective humiliation nonetheless. Kiram's expression remained cold. "No." "Oh?" Asdith's eyes instantly turned icy. "If words won't work, I'll just use the most effective method to make you comply." Given her personality, it was obvious what that meant. She was ready to fight. If persuasion didn't work, she would make Kiram submit through force. Realizing this, Kiram's expression became even colder. Without hesitation, she drew Yotsufusa from her waist, fully prepared for battle. Seeing the situation escalate, Blaine couldn't just stand by and let them fight. Causing a commotion in the imperial capital would be far too reckless. More importantly, infighting among their own was simply unacceptable. "Enough," Blaine said firmly, stopping both of them. "Let me make one thing clear: our own members do not fight each other. Kiram is also a part of Akatsuki." "Akatsuki? So that's the organization you founded?" Asdith mused, nodding slowly without much surprise. Back when Bull was assassinated and the stolen wealth was distributed to the common people, the name Akatsuki had caused quite a stir. Asdith had heard about it after returning from the northern borders, but at the time, she hadn't realized Blaine was the one behind it. It wasn't until just now, when Blaine spoke of his ideals to the three beasts, that she put the pieces together. Now, it all made sense. "I understand." Kiram obediently nodded. With that, Blaine successfully diffused the situation. More than anything, Asdith was the real challenge. No one besides Blaine had the authority to rein her in. She only listened to him, and when she did, she followed his words completely. A short while later, Asdith suddenly received a message. It was about the Jaggers. "The Tegu users have been located. Prime Minister Honest wants me at the palace immediately," Asdith informed Blaine. "Go ahead," Blaine replied. "Just don't act impulsively. Handle it the way you normally would." "Got it." With that, Asdith nodded and left for the palace. Not long after she was gone, Kiram seemed to still be thinking about what had just happened. She hesitated before whispering to Blaine, "Commander. So you men really like that kind of thing, huh?" "What?" Blaine blinked, not immediately grasping her meaning. Seeing that he didn't get it, Kiram suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She had to be more direct. That. To make her point clear, she deliberately made a cupping gesture with her hands. Blaine instantly understood. "Oh. So that's what she meant." "Ahem." Blaine coughed, feeling a bit awkward about the topic. "How should I put it? I don't really care about that kind of thing," he said seriously. "I don't believe you unless you prove it," Kiram said suddenly. Blaine looked puzzled. "And how exactly am I supposed to prove that?" "Like this." Kiram pressed a finger against her lips. It wasn't even a hint anymore, it was practically a direct invitation. "If you're willing to do it, then I'll believe you." Blaine was caught completely off guard. Kurom was suddenly being so direct that he found himself momentarily stunned. He had suspected before that she might have a bit of a crush on him, but this was something else entirely. The way she was acting now was far beyond a simple crush. Chelsea, who had been watching from the side, was equally shocked. Little Kurom just went all in. Was this because of Esdeath? At that moment, Kurom stared straight into Blaine's eyes. A faint blush colored her cheeks, but she didn't look away. She was dead serious about this. Esdeath had shown up out of nowhere, practically crashing into their world like a force of nature. That had rattled Kurom, pushing her to take bold action before it was too late. "You don't like this?" she asked, her tone carrying a hint of grievance. "You looked like you were enjoying yourself when it was Esdeath." "Huh? Did I really have that kind of expression?" Blaine asked in disbelief. As far as he remembered, he had been completely stunned at the time. His face should have been nothing but shock. Which, to be fair, was true. Kurom was just embellishing things a little. "Anyway, Commander, are you going to prove it to me or not?" she pressed. She wasn't going to let this chance slip away. In fact, she was outright pressuring him now. "I got it." Blaine had calmed down by this point. Kurom had made her intentions clear, so he figured he had to respond in kind. He took a step forward and lightly brushed his lips against hers. It was over in an instant. This good enough? Even Blaine felt his face heat up a little. Taking the initiative felt completely different from being forcibly kissed. "It's good. I believe you now," Kurom said with a radiant smile. The combination of her happy expression and the blush on her cheeks made her look incredibly cute. Even though it had only lasted a moment, she was satisfied. After all, this time, she had won against Esdeath. Esdeath had taken what she wanted by force, but this time, Blaine had acted on his own. Chelsea, who had been silently watching the entire scene, didn't say a word. Her expression remained calm, but there was a trace of emotion hidden beneath that calmness. She suddenly realized things were about to get a lot more difficult for her. Esdeath and Kurom were already fierce rivals, and there were likely other contenders in the shadows as well. Sure, she could use this moment to confess her own feelings to Blaine, but Kurom had already beaten her to it. If she did the same thing now, it would just seem like she was copying her, and that wouldn't leave much of an impression. So instead, she decided to wait for a better opportunity. But there was something else on her mind, something more troubling. The relationship between Akatsuki and the Revolutionary Army. For now, Blaine's Akatsuki and their nitrade seemed to be on friendly terms. But once Prime Minister Honest was overthrown, the two groups would likely end up on opposing sides. And when that time came, how would they handle it? Chapter 134, The Jeggers. We're all adults here. This isn't just a game. If neither side is willing to compromise, a battle is inevitable. Chelsea really didn't want to end up as an enemy of Blaine and the others if there was any way to avoid it. With these thoughts weighing on her mind, she found herself caring less about what had just happened between Kurom and Esdeath. After thinking it over, Chelsea decided it would be best to talk to Blaine directly. A moment later, she suddenly spoke up. "Blaine, after we overthrow Prime Minister Honest, I guess that makes us enemies, doesn't it?" Blaine fell silent for a moment upon hearing that. "Yeah, I suppose so. I won't compromise on this. Well, I was thinking, if possible, I'd like to try convincing Nitrade and the Revolutionary Army," Chelsea said. Personally, she had no real objection to Akatsuki's ideals. The main reason she had joined the Revolutionary Army in the first place was her deep disgust for the Empire's corruption. As long as they could eliminate the source of that corruption, Prime Minister Honest, it didn't really matter whether the Empire was overthrown or reformed from within. She believed most people in the Revolutionary Army could be reasoned with on that point. "Even though we're not at that stage yet, it's definitely something we need to plan for," Blaine said thoughtfully. The Revolutionary Army had no shortage of talented individuals, many of whom could play a key role in rebuilding the Empire. If they could be persuaded, that would be ideal. But if not, then force might be the only option. After a brief pause, Blaine came up with a preliminary idea. "How about this? When the time comes, we stage a little show. But it'll require your cooperation. It's up to you." Blaine then shared his rough plan with Chelsea, thinking he'd also bring it up with Najunda and the others when the opportunity arose. Imperial capital, Royal Palace. Esdeath stood before Prime Minister Honest. She still remembered Blaine's words and hadn't acted recklessly, even though she was confident she could crush the minister beneath her heel at any moment. Her demeanor remained unchanged, showing no signs of suspicion. Honest, oblivious to her true allegiance, casually held a loaf of bread in one hand and a list in the other, completely unaware that his most trusted ally had already turned against him. "Esdeath, I barely managed to find 4 of the 6 Tegu users you wanted. The only ones I could gather were either low-ranking or eccentric. Don't blame me, I really did my best." Honest said helplessly, glancing at the short list of names. The reason for this was simple. In the original timeline, Sarah and Kurum would have been part of the Jaggers, but Blaine had already taken them under his wing. As a result, the squad, which was supposed to consist of 6 members, had been reduced to just 4. The Empire had a limited number of Tegu users to begin with, and nearly half of the Tegus had either fallen into the hands of the Revolutionary Army or ended up outside the country. Finding 2 more capable recruits was practically impossible. But Esdeath didn't care. She no longer needed to fight Night Raid, so it made no difference to her. 4 will do. That's more than enough to deal with those Night Raid thieves, she said indifferently. Besides, I have stronger forces at my disposal now, apart from the 3 beasts. It won't be a problem. Ah, you mean Blaine? With you handling things, I have nothing to worry about. Honest immediately assumed Blaine was part of the Jaggers as well. He had already heard about Skiulu's death at the hands of Esdeath and Blaine, but it didn't concern him. After all, as long as Esdeath was in control, everything was fine. That's right. Esdeath nodded slightly. Honest remained completely unaware that things were the exact opposite. Blaine wasn't joining the Jaggers. Esdeath, on the other hand, had become a member of Akatsuki. Even as she took the list and left the palace, Honest suspected nothing. I wonder what kind of people these new Tegu users are. Might as well have a little fun with them. Esdeath thought as she walked away, utterly unconcerned. After returning, Esdeath immediately reported everything to Blaine. 4 Tegu users, that's not bad at all, Blaine said, satisfied. Then a thought struck him. Based on Honest's words, if Kurum and Sarah hadn't been influenced by him, they would have been the Jaggers' 5th and 6th members. They should be arriving soon, probably in the next couple of days. You'll get a chance to meet them then, Esdeath said. All right. Speaking of which, do you want to meet the rest of Night Raid? Blaine suddenly suggested. He realized this was the perfect opportunity to take Esdeath to their base. After all, he had boasted before that he would handle Esdeath on his own, and now he had. More importantly, he needed to discuss the plan he had in mind with Night Raid, and having Esdeath under his control was the perfect bargaining chip. Sure, if I remember correctly, Najunda is with Night Raid, right? This should be interesting, Esdeath said, suddenly intrigued. To her, Najunda was nothing more than naive Najunda. Toying with her was entertaining. That was the only reason she had spared Najunda's life before. Otherwise, losing an eye and an arm would have been the least of her worries. Yes, Najunda is our leader now, Chelsea chimed in. Oh? So you're with Night Raid, not Akatsuki? Esdeath said, slightly surprised. She had assumed both of the women following Blaine were part of Akatsuki. Well, it doesn't really make much of a difference. Whether I'm with Akatsuki or Night Raid, my owner is still my owner, Chelsea said playfully. Blaine sighed. Can you not say things that are so easy to misinterpret? Chelsea stuck out her tongue mischievously, clearly having no intention of changing her ways. With nothing pressing left to handle in the Imperial capital, Esdeath followed Blaine to the Night Raid base. Meanwhile, Akame and Mine had received word that their mission was over and were on their way back. But there was a problem. Blaine hadn't told Najunda in advance that he was bringing Esdeath with him. Which meant, as far as Night Raid was concerned, Esdeath was about to show up completely unannounced. Chapter 135, Esdeath's assault. From Najunda's perspective, this was a terrifying situation. The Night Raid base was equipped with various detection systems designed to sense approaching enemies, allowing them to identify intruders in advance. As soon as Blaine and Esdeath entered the perimeter, Najunda tensed up. Esdeath is here. Without hesitation, she gathered everyone in the base. Blaine, Kurum, and Chelsea are with her, but this is Esdeath we're talking about. We can't afford to be careless. Akame and Mine were still on their way back, so the only ones present were Najunda, Leon, Bullet, Lubbock, and Shiel. The moment they heard Esdeath had arrived, everyone's expressions grew solemn. Could Blaine and the others have been captured? Maybe Esdeath forced them to guide her here, otherwise, why would she be with them? Lubbock speculated. Chelsea isn't the type to go along with something like that. Regardless, we should prepare for a fight, Najunda said. She had a bad feeling about this. With Akame and Mine absent, their chances of winning a battle against Esdeath were slim even if they all fought together. Her original plan had always relied on Akame as the key to countering Esdeath. On top of that, they would need at least 10 Tegu users and 50,000 elite soldiers to stand a real chance. Given the circumstances, the most rational course of action would be to abandon the base entirely and avoid a direct confrontation. Otherwise, not only would they have little hope of defeating Esdeath, but the losses would be devastating. But Chelsea was still out there, and Najunda wasn't about to leave one of her comrades behind. And then there was Blaine and Kurum. It's probably not the best thing to say right now, but Blaine wouldn't betray us, right? Leon suddenly asked. Najunda fell silent for a moment before responding. I don't think so. If he had, Chelsea wouldn't still be with them. Still, she couldn't completely rule out the possibility. How about this, I'll hold Esdeath off while you guys find a way to get Chelsea and the others out of here. Bullet suggested, leaning against the table with his arms crossed. No way. I'm not abandoning my comrades. Lubbock said firmly, shaking his head. Then let's see what happens. Leone said, cracking her knuckles. The boss always says Esdeath is strong, but I haven't had the chance to see it for myself. I'll go check out the situation first. Without hesitation, Leone strode toward the exit, fearless. If Esdeath had came to attack, there was no avoiding a fight. They might as well meet her head-on with confidence. Najunda and the others followed closely behind. Outside the base, Najunda and the others could see Esdeath and her group approaching from a distance. Why do I get the feeling that Esdeath isn't here to attack us? Leone muttered, finding the situation a bit strange. She carefully observed the expressions and body language of Esdeath, Blaine, Kiram, and Chelsea. Something felt off. Stay on guard. Najunda warned, refusing to let her vigilance drop. Meanwhile, Esdeath, Blaine, and the others had also spotted Night Raid. If Chelsea had simply waved at Najunda and the others, she could have cleared up some of the misunderstanding right away. But the problem was, with her mischievous nature, she loved playing pranks. They came out to greet us directly? No. Judging by their tense expressions, they probably think you're here to start a fight. Blaine remarked to Esdeath. Esdeath smiled playfully. Stay quiet for a bit. I'd like to have a nice little chat with Najunda. Fine, just don't take it too far. Blaine replied, easily guessing that Esdeath intended to mess with Najunda a little. As they got closer, Esdeath came to a stop. With the air of an old friend reuniting, she said, It's been a while, Najunda. Esdeath. Najunda's expression was cold, and her tone was heavy with hostility. Her gaze was filled with both animosity and hatred. It was Esdeath, after all, who had taken her right hand and right eye. From Najunda's perspective, the way Esdeath was smiling now was no different from when she was toying with her enemies before killing them. It really did look like she had come here to attack them. Chelsea, on the other hand, appeared completely at ease, even wearing a faint smile. She certainly didn't look like someone who had been captured by Esdeath. But since Chelsea wasn't saying anything, it was easy to misinterpret the situation. Go on, take a guess. What do you think I'm here for? Esdeath teased. Is there anything else you even know how to do besides killing? Najunda shot back coldly. Blaine, Chelsea, what the hell is going on with you two? Leone couldn't hold back any longer and turned to Blaine and Chelsea. Did Esdeath really capture you? Or does she have something on you? Before Blaine or Chelsea could answer, Esdeath spoke first. Who says I can't be here to help you? If you're looking for a fight, then Najunda started to respond instinctively, but halfway through, she suddenly processed what Esdeath had actually said. Her expression changed to one of utter shock. What did you just say? You're here to help us? Not just Najunda, Leone, Shiel, and the others were equally stunned. They could hardly believe it. Esdeath. Joining them. This was supposed to be their greatest enemy. Esdeath took a step forward, closing the distance between herself and Najunda. Najunda unconsciously stepped back half a pace. The last time they had fought, Esdeath had completely overwhelmed her. Even now, some part of her still carried the psychological scars from that encounter. I don't make jokes. Esdeath said firmly. But let's be clear, only Blaine has the right to give me orders. No one else. That includes you. Najunda had worked alongside Esdeath before and knew she was never one to lie. But for her to suddenly claim to be their ally, that was incomprehensible. By all logic, Esdeath was the least likely person to ever side with the Revolutionary Army. But then, Esdeath had just mentioned Blaine. Najunda's eyes immediately turned to him, filled with disbelief. Blaine. What the hell is going on here? Esdeath answered for him before he could speak. I fought Blaine in a duel and lost. So now, I follow his orders. Do you understand now, naive Najunda? She even made sure to mock Najunda at the end. Najunda's lips twitched slightly. Whether you're really our ally or not, I can already tell I still won't get along with you. Wait, are you serious? Blaine actually beat Esdeath? Lubbock exclaimed in shock. That's right. And in a one-on-one duel. I was utterly defeated. Esdeath admitted without any shame. If anything, she almost sounded like she was bragging. In fact, she even seemed a little happy about it. After all, Blaine was her man. His strength was something to be proud of. Blaine, however, felt the need to correct her. You're exaggerating. It wasn't exactly a flawless victory. Technically, it had been a decisive win, but Esdeath's trump card Mahapadma had nearly turned the tide at the last moment. Fortunately, Mahapadma only created relative freezing, not absolute freezing. If it had been the latter, things might have ended very differently. Of course, that was just a hypothetical. An ability as absurd as absolute freezing probably wouldn't even exist. Either way, from a strict standpoint, Blaine didn't consider it a complete victory over Asdeath. However, you weren't using your full strength back then, were you? Asdeath suddenly asked. Blaine was momentarily surprised. Did Asdeath actually think he had been holding back? No, I had already used everything I had at the time. He denied. And he wasn't lying. During that fight, he had pushed himself to the limit, utilizing the second form of Susanoo and enchanting his weapons with the power of Kamui. That was practically the peak of his capabilities at that moment. Of course, that was for now. With time and more system points, his stats would only continue to improve, and his strength would grow even further. Alright, let's get back on track, Blaine said, shifting the conversation back to the main topic. He turned to Najunda and the others. As Asdeath just mentioned, she's no longer part of Prime Minister Honest's faction. Najunda and the others were still in shock. The idea that Blaine had actually defeated Asdeath was almost unbelievable. If Asdeath hadn't said it herself, they would have thought Blaine was bluffing. After all, the Revolutionary Army had been preparing for years to build up enough strength to challenge Asdeath, and even now, they weren't confident in their chances. Yet Blaine had taken her down in a one-on-one fight, something they had always believed was impossible. So, Asdeath is going to fight alongside us to overthrow Honest? Najunda asked, still finding it hard to believe. Yes. She's no longer a general of the Empire. Blaine confirmed with a nod. In that case, doesn't this mean we practically can't lose? Leon said excitedly. Previously, the Revolutionary Army's biggest concerns about the Empire's military were divided as follows: 50% of their fear was because of Asdeath, 40% because of General Do, and the remaining 10% was spread across everyone else. Now, not only was Asdeath no longer an enemy, but she had also become their ally. Victory was all but assured. At that moment, Najunda, Leon, and the others suddenly recalled that Blaine had once told them he would deal with Asdeath by himself. Back then, most of them had dismissed it as overconfident boasting. Yet here they were. Maybe, Blaine said. But I actually came here for another important matter. His expression grew more serious. With Asdeath on our side, I have full confidence in winning. But once Honest falls, you haven't forgotten the differences in our ideals, have you? Najunda nodded. Yes, I remember. You don't want to overthrow the Empire, you want to change it from within. As soon as she recalled this issue, she immediately understood its significance. If things weren't handled properly, the Revolutionary Army and Blaine's Akatsuki could end up as enemies. After witnessing Asdeath's defection, Najunda had no choice but to reevaluate the strength of Akatsuki. Not only was Blaine far stronger than she had originally thought, but now he had Asdeath as well. The Revolutionary Army had already struggled with one Asdeath. If Blaine, who had defeated her, became their enemy too, the consequences would be disastrous. That was why Najunda took this matter extremely seriously. It was clear that Blaine using Asdeath as leverage had been a smart move, otherwise, Najunda wouldn't be treating this negotiation with such caution. How should I put this? Najunda said thoughtfully. We always believed that reforming the Empire from within was unrealistic. The officials in the Conscience faction have never had the power to resist Honest's tyranny. She paused before continuing in a more serious tone. But if it's you, I think it could work. After all, you're strong enough. She took a deep breath. I can't speak for the entire Revolutionary Army, but personally, I'm not completely set on the idea that the Empire must be overthrown. At this moment, Najunda embodied the phrase cautious diplomacy to perfection. Asdeath's unexpected shift had forced her to tread carefully. Just then, a danger beast appeared in the sky. While circling at low altitude, two figures leapt off its back. Perfect timing, Akame and mine are back, Chelsea said, recognizing them instantly. What's going on here? Mine had just spoken when her gaze suddenly landed on Asdeath standing beside Blaine. Even though she had never met Asdeath in person before, she had seen plenty of wanted posters and reports about her. She recognized her instantly. Wait a second, that's Asdeath? Mine's expression tensed up immediately. But she doesn't seem hostile, Akame said, her crimson eyes locking onto Asdeath with a wary expression. Najunda quickly explained everything that had just happened. I see. After hearing the full story, Mine looked at Blaine in astonishment. You actually defeated Asdeath, she muttered. She let out a breath before admitting, I have to say, I seriously underestimated you before. Mine was willing to acknowledge her mistake. Blaine simply shrugged. It's in the past. No big deal. For now, let's focus on what happens after we take down Honest, Najunda said, bringing the conversation back to the main issue. I can go to the Revolutionary Army's headquarters and try to convince the others, but I can't guarantee how many will listen. I have a plan for that, Blaine said, using the opportunity to explain the strategy he had come up with. Chapter 136, Already Lovers. Next, our Akatsuki organization will completely overthrow the honest regime. This will give us the greatest possible leverage. If there are still people within the Revolutionary Army unwilling to compromise in this situation, then there's nothing more I can do. Blaine laid out his general plan. Additionally, after the fall of the honest regime, I need you all to cooperate with us in putting on a show. A show? Nagenda asked, puzzled. That's right. You'll pretend to be hostile toward our Akatsuki organization, and we'll engage in a staged battle, making it look like we both suffered heavy losses. This will give the foreign nations the impression that the Empire is in a state of chaos and weakness. Blaine nodded. Let's see how they react. This way, we'll know exactly where they stand. If those foreign nations seized the opportunity to invade, it would confirm Blaine's suspicions and further prove that the Revolutionary Army's alliance with them was unreliable. I see. Nagenda already had a grasp of the situation. Among the foreign tribes, the northern tribes had been relentlessly invading the Empire for years until Esteith decisively crushed them not long ago. The western tribes had never given up their claim on the Empire's western lands, and the southern tribes were also eager to make a move. Given the current state of affairs, once they and Blaine began their act, at least some of these foreign factions would take the bait. The Revolutionary Army had been desperate to overthrow the Empire, which was why they had allied with the western tribes and even considered the northern tribes as allies, hoping to use them to keep Esteith occupied. Their methods had been ruthless, prioritizing victory over caution. But now, Blaine could accomplish what the Revolutionary Army needed foreign help to achieve. Nagenda no longer saw a reason to rely on those outside forces. First, what do you all think? Will you compromise, or are you determined to overthrow the Empire? Blaine directed his question to the members of Night Trade. After a brief silence, Leon was the first to speak. Doesn't really matter to me. As long as we get to kill that damn Prime Minister, I'm good with it. Her tone and expression were relaxed, unconcerned. She had only joined the Revolutionary Army because it was her only option at the time. Whether or not the Empire was completely overthrown didn't particularly matter to her. Next, Akame spoke up. If we can change the Empire from within and free the people from its darkness, then that aligns with my beliefs. Sister. Kurome's heart swelled with relief. If this was the path they chose, she and her sister wouldn't have to cross blades in the end. One by one, the other members of Night Raid voiced their agreement. Not a single one objected. For one, they had spent enough time with Blaine to trust him completely. Secondly, Blaine's overwhelming strength and the fact that Esteith was now on his side gave immense weight to every word he spoke. And of course, changing the Empire from within was never an unacceptable option for them. Take Lubbock, for example. He had joined the Revolutionary Army primarily to follow Nagenda, not because he cared about overthrowing the Empire. What mattered to him was his comrades, especially Nagenda. Sheila had even less attachment to the cause. She simply knew she was good at killing and had no desire to serve the corrupt officials of a decaying empire. She just wanted to use her skills to help others within the Revolutionary Army. In the end, the only one who hadn't spoken yet was mine. She seemed a bit hesitant. Blaine. I want to know what you think about the Western tribes. If you're asking about that, my stance is simple: if they don't harm me, I won't harm them. I have no intention of attacking others without reason. Blaine smiled. Besides, haven't you already said it yourself? Once the Prime Minister is overthrown, you'll be a hero. With that status, you'll have the power to improve the issues of racial discrimination and oppression. Mine's worries instantly faded. Her only concern had been how Blaine would treat the Western tribes, but now, with his stance clear, Night Raid had no objections to his ideals. Seeing this result, Blaine was quite satisfied. Then, we'll leave the matter of dealing with Honest to Akatsuki. You all can rest for now, he said. All right, we'll leave it to you. Nagenda nodded. At this point, she had no reason to doubt Akatsuki's strength. Esteith alone was powerful enough to cripple the Ernest regime, and Blaine was even stronger than her. In the meantime, Night Raid wouldn't be idle. They could continue taking assignments in the Imperial capital as usual. The Revolutionary Army hadn't planned to launch an attack on the capital so soon anyway. According to the original timeline, there was still a long period of preparation ahead. Esteith, as an enemy, you're terrifying, but as an ally, you're incredibly reliable. Nagenda suddenly remarked. Is that so? But I wouldn't really call myself your ally. I simply follow Blaine's orders. Esteith replied with a faint smile. If Blaine told me to kill you all, I wouldn't hesitate for a second. That's exactly why I said you're terrifying. Let's hope it never comes to that. Nagenda's expression remained calm. Blaine, this woman is dangerous. Are you really okay keeping her by your side? Esteith's words had clearly irritated mine, prompting her to question Blaine directly. Is it really appropriate for you to say something so rude about someone's lover? Before Blaine could respond, Asdith spoke first, her tone calm yet laced with amusement. Lover? Mine froze, momentarily unable to process what she had just heard. That's right, I haven't had the chance to properly introduce myself. Blaine and I are deeply in love. We're a couple. Asdith spoke with a composed smile, her tone carrying a hint of pride. She had noticed from the start that there were quite a few women in Night Raid, so she felt it necessary to establish her relationship with Blaine. What? What's going on? Mine was completely stunned. She had no idea when Blaine and Asdith had suddenly become lovers. Blaine, is this true? Mine looked straight at Blaine, clearly concerned. It's true. Blaine didn't deny it. As for why he and Asdith had become lovers mainly to repay a favor, he saw no need to explain further. There was no point in justifying it, otherwise, it would feel like he was rejecting Asdith outright. At the very least, he didn't want to let her down. Hearing Blaine's confirmation, Mine felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Though she managed to maintain her composure, the revelation hit her hard. But she quickly pulled herself together. She wasn't the type to crumble so easily. Instead, a sense of determination ignited within her. Even if her rival was Asdith, she wasn't about to give up without a fight. Chapter 137, A Steady and Relentless Blitzkrieg. There was nothing left to do at Night Raid's base. Blaine, Kuram, and Asdith were preparing to return to their own base, the Akatsuki organization. Just as they were about to set off, Akame suddenly raised her hand and said, I want to go back with Kuram as well. I won't interfere when you deal with Prime Minister Honest. She emphasized the latter part because Blaine had stated that the Akatsuki organization would handle Honest on their own. That's totally fine. Blaine agreed without hesitation. It didn't affect him in any way, and Kuram would certainly be happy about it. I want to go too. Mine said. Noticing Blaine's puzzled look, Mine suddenly felt a little embarrassed. With so many people watching, she couldn't bring herself to say the real reason, so she came up with an excuse. Because Sarah looked after me before, I want to properly thank her. Asdith, perceptive as ever, immediately picked up on Mine's lie and suspected that her real reason had to do with Blaine. However, she didn't call her out on it. There was no solid proof, after all. Even if Mine really did have feelings for Blaine, Asdith wasn't worried. Though she had lost to Blaine in battle, her confidence in her own strength remained unshaken. To her, power was far more important than charm, though she seemed unaware that her charm alone was enough to captivate countless people. That sounds interesting. I'd like to tag along too. Compared to Mine, Chelsea spoke in a much more natural and casual manner. Well, if Blaine doesn't mind, then go ahead. Najunda said. She had no objections to temporarily losing 3 members, as there were no urgent missions at the moment. And so, they all made their way back to the Akatsuki organization's base. For Akame, Kuram, and Mine, this wasn't their first time visiting the Akatsuki base. However, Asdith's arrival caused quite a stir among its members. The feared General Asdith had suddenly become their ally. It was a shocking development. Only after Blaine explained the situation in detail did everyone finally calm down. He also briefed them on the Revolutionary Army. Take the next 2 days to rest. After that, we'll officially launch our offensive against Honest's regime. Blaine announced. Our battle plan will be a combination of steady tactics and blitzkrieg, quickly toppling Honest's government while avoiding reckless haste. Though cautious advance and blitzkrieg seemed contradictory, it wasn't difficult to balance the two. For instance, Blaine and Asdith would take on the toughest opponents, while the rest of the enemies would be dealt with by the other members one by one. With the Akatsuki organization's current strength, this strategy was more than feasible. During the 2-day break, Blaine focused on letting his body recover while refining the battle plan. He carefully decided which enemies to eliminate first, using both his own intelligence and the information provided by Asdith. The most noteworthy threats were the mysterious Tegu possessed by Prime Minister Honest and the Supreme Tegu wielded by the young Emperor. The Emperor holds the Supreme Tegu, also known as the strongest Tegu. It has been passed down through the royal family for generations, but there are hardly any records about it, so I don't know much either. Asdith said. But even if it truly is the strongest Tegu, I'm confident I can suppress it. Then we'll leave the young Emperor and Honest for last and deal with the other targets first. Blaine decided. By the way, those 4 Tegu users we talked about earlier should have arrived by now. Should we go and have some fun with them? Asdith suggested, recalling the Jeggers. Alright, let's see what kind of people they are. Blaine nodded slightly. Wave, a former Imperial Navy officer, wielded the Tegu Carnage Incarnate, Grand Chariot. Run, once a teacher in a rural village, possessed the Tegu 1,000-mile flight, Mostama. Dr. Stylish, a well-known scientist, carried the Tegu Glorious Hands of God, Perfector. Bowls, from the Empire's incineration troops, use the Tegu Purgatory's invitation, Rubicant. These 4 form the Jeggers. Blaine had already reviewed their basic information from Asdeath's list, and now, he was meeting them in person. Wave was a cheerful-looking young man with blue hair and slightly tanned skin. His attire made it obvious that he was a country bumpkin. And he was carrying a large sack of seafood. Run was a tall and handsome young man with a slender build, wearing an ornament resembling a feather on his left ear. Dr. Stylish, true to his name, wore a white lab coat and glasses, giving off a distinct scientist vibe. Bowles had the most unusual appearance. He wore a strange mask and was shirtless, exposing his muscular physique. Blaine, lend me your mask for a bit. I want to have some fun with them first. Asdeath suddenly said. Since Blaine and Asdeath had entered through the back entrance, the 4 Jeggers hadn't noticed them yet. Blaine had no reason to refuse, so he casually handed Asdeath his white mask. There were no side effects from someone else wearing it, though, naturally, the full attribute bonuses wouldn't apply. Taking the mask, Asdeath put it on and immediately launched an attack on the 4 Jeggers. Caught off guard, Wave and the others instinctively assumed an enemy was ambushing them. Simply wearing a mask was enough to prevent them from recognizing Asdeath. Who are you? Wave demanded warily. Asdeath didn't respond. She just sent him flying with a powerful sidekick. Then, she turned to the other 3 and engaged them as well. Of course, she wasn't fighting seriously. Once she felt satisfied, she stopped. Even so, her sudden assault left a lasting impression on the 4 Jeggers, overwhelming them with her sheer presence. Only when Asdeath removed the mask did they finally recognize her. General Asdeath? Bowles was the first to exclaim. General Asdeath? Wasn't she their commander? Still lying on the ground, Wave was stunned. Even their own commander was acting completely unpredictably. Did that little surprise scare you? I thought a normal greeting would be too dull, so I went with something a bit more exciting. Asdeath said casually. Then, she handed the white mask back to Blaine. By the way, let me introduce you. This man is also your superior. His orders take precedence over mine. Chapter 138, Blaine is my man. Oh? So he's our commander too? At that moment, Wave stood up. None of the 4, including Wave, recognized Blaine. Only figures as renowned across the Empire as Asdeath were widely recognizable. I am Blaine. Pleased to meet you. Blaine introduced himself to the 4 standing before him. Hello, Commander. My name is Wave. Wave immediately saluted. My name is Run. Please take care of us, Commander. Run said politely. I'm Bowles. Despite being the most intimidating looking of the group, Bowles seemed somewhat shy. Commander, you're quite good looking. I wonder what's your opinion on fashionable men? Dr. Stylish adjusted his glasses, his tone laced with implication as he addressed Blaine. Hearing that, Blaine felt an odd sense of discomfort. Wait. Is this guy? In fact, Dr. Stylish was indeed gay. The moment Asdeath heard him make such a suggestive remark toward Blaine, her gaze instantly turned ice cold. Without hesitation, she strode toward Dr. Stylish, her expression frigid. Before he could even process what was happening, she delivered a brutal kick that sent him flying. He crashed into the wall several meters away, leaving a deep dent in it. Dr. Stylish's Tegu primarily functioned as a support tool, and his own physical abilities were far from exceptional. In hand-to-hand combat, he stood no chance against Asdeath. Wave and Bowles were both stunned, while Run's expression grew serious. Just moments ago, General Asdeath had been joking with them, but now it was clear this was no joke. No, to be precise, she was angry. If she were truly serious, she would have used her Tegu's power instead. Cough. Dr. Stylish coughed up blood from the impact. OF. Commander, that was ruthless. I don't think I did anything wrong, did I? His face was pale, his voice weak, and his expression filled with confusion. He couldn't understand why Asdeath had suddenly lashed out so violently. Compared to the light-hearted teasing from before, this was an entirely different level of force. Blaine is my man. If you dare speak out of line again, I'll tear out your tongue. Asdeath's voice was cold, carrying an unmistakable killing intent. She was not joking. Only then did Dr. Stylish realize Blaine and Asdeath were already in that kind of relationship. In that case, his earlier remark had indeed crossed the line. My deepest apologies. I wasn't aware of your relationship, and I won't make the same mistake again. Faced with an enraged Asdeath, Dr. Stylish dared not act frivolous any longer. He admitted his mistake seriously and sincerely. Otherwise, he had no doubt Asdeath would actually kill him. That's better. Asdeath's tone relaxed slightly, and the coldness on her face eased. Blaine had no intention of commenting on the situation. In his opinion, Asdeath handled it well. He wasn't fond of being pursued by someone like Dr. Stylish anyway. Asdeath's decisive action had swiftly and effectively put an end to Dr. Stylish's advances. Now understanding the situation, Wave, Bowles, and Run all let out a breath of relief. At the very least, it was clear that Commander Asdeath wasn't the type to lash out at the slightest provocation. Dr. Stylish had simply gone too far, stepping over a line he should never have crossed. Anyway, I'm not usually one to comment on other people's outfits, but your getup. Blaine glanced at Bowles with a hint of concern. Bowles' attire was, honestly, a bit too strange. Well, I'm naturally shy, and I think I look ugly and scary. I don't want to frighten others, so. Bowles said awkwardly. I see. Blaine gave a slight nod. But if anything, didn't Bowles' current appearance make him even scarier? Still, Blaine wasn't one to meddle, so he decided to leave it at that. Just then, the sound of boiling water filled the air. Bowles immediately went to fetch it, preparing a cup of tea for everyone. We're all Tegu users. Let's get along. Bowles said. I'm probably the oldest among us, and I really can't keep acting like this forever. Perhaps Blaine's words had an effect. Bowles seemed a little more open than before. After spending some time together, Blaine found the other three excluding Dr. Stylish fairly decent. They didn't seem like bad people at heart, but whether that was truly the case remained to be seen. Commander, what's our next move? If I remember correctly, we were gathered to deal with an assassin group called Night Raid, right? Wave asked, addressing both Blaine and Asdeath. No, this has nothing to do with Night Raid. Our real target is the corrupt officials who have plunged the Empire into darkness. Asdeath stated bluntly. Blaine was slightly surprised. Was she really being this direct right from the start? Wave and the others had even more dramatic reactions. Huh. I didn't know that. So the Empire has problems like that too. Wave looked visibly shocked. Having served in the Imperial Navy for years, he had been largely unaware of the Empire's corruption. But since it was General Asdeath saying this, it had to be true. Bowles remained silent. His mask obscured his expression, but his posture hinted at a heavy mood. Asdeath's words stirred up painful memories. As a former member of the Imperial Incineration Squad, he had carried out countless orders burning prisoners, torching villages infected with disease, and eliminating those suspected of ties to the Revolutionary Army. He knew his actions were unforgivable. But as a soldier, following the Empire's orders had been his duty. Deep down, the guilt tormented him. He felt as though retribution would come for him someday. But he had a wife and daughter waiting for him at home. He had to keep living for their sake. I don't really know much about that either. Dr. Stylish said with feigned ignorance. In truth, he was well aware of the Empire's corruption. He just didn't care. The only thing that interested him was his research. And he wasn't exactly a saint himself. Run remained silent as well. There are countless corrupt officials in the Empire. Asdeath continued. Our duty as the Jaggers is to eliminate them. Yes, our team's name is Jaggers. Also known as Tegu Hunters. Her tone was calm, yet it carried undeniable authority. As the Empire's strongest, her words held unquestionable weight. Wave and the others didn't dare doubt her. To them, Asdeath was their commander. Their duty was simply to follow her orders. Blaine couldn't help but think that Asdeath was proving invaluable under these circumstances. No one else's words would have carried the same authority as hers. I understand. I'll do my part. Wave said with a nod. Same here. Bowles added. Run and Dr. Stylish also voiced their agreement. Not that they had much of a choice, especially Dr. Stylish, who definitely didn't want another beating from Asdeath. That could very well be fatal. Good. Your first target is the head of public finance Jebes. Let's see how well you handle it. Asdeath wasted no time assigning them their first mission. Of course, she didn't actually care anything outside of combat, and Blaine was meaningless to her. If she had to put it into words, she was genuinely considering what to do for Blaine. She had always known that the head of public finance Jebes was one of the Empire's most corrupt officials, but she had no personal interest in dealing with him. For one, he was too weak, and for another, she simply didn't care about corrupt officials. However, from Blaine's perspective, a man like that had to be eliminated. Step by step, they would weaken Honest's regime before finally taking down the young Emperor and Prime Minister Honest himself. Alright, so we're heading out now. Wave was full of energy. Since he was here, he had to make a good impression on his new commander. We'll depart within the day. This mission isn't difficult. I expect you all to meet my expectations. Asdeath said. Leave it to me. Wave said confidently. I'll do my best and try not to disappoint everyone. Bowles added, bracing himself. Let's all work hard. Run said with a smile. Dr. Stylish rested his chin on his hand, remaining silent. Something felt off to him. The head of public finance was an important figure. Was he really being eliminated just like that? But the one who issued the order was General Esdeath, Honest's most trusted general. There shouldn't be any issues. Maybe Honest had simply decided to purge some people. With Wave leading the way, the Jeggers set out on their first mission. After the Jeggers left, Esdeath summoned the three beasts. Liver, Nyaw, Didara, keep an eye on them. Make sure they don't notice you. If they do, just say you're my subordinates. Yes. The three responded in unison before immediately setting out. Blaine couldn't help but remark, Esdeath is really reliable. It feels like I could leave everything to you without a problem. He hadn't done anything just now, not even discussed the plan with Esdeath in advance. She had acted entirely on her own, yet her decisions had satisfied him completely. Hearing Blaine's praise, Esdeath suddenly looked as happy as a little girl, a stark contrast to the cold, domineering demeanor she showed to others. Jebez was heavily guarded, protected by a Tegu user and an elite squad of bodyguards, an impressive force on paper. However, against 4 Tegu users attacking at once, those bodyguards were no match. Wave's Tegu, Grand Chariot, was essentially a re-release of demon armor. Its base stats were slightly superior, but unlike demon armor, it lacked the ability to evolve further. The moment Wave activated his Tegu, his entire body was covered in blue armor. A stat monster like him tore through the elite guards as if they weren't even there, rampaging through their formation. Bowles wielded a flamethrower-type Tegu capable of producing inextinguishable flames, ones that couldn't be put out with water and could even turn into molten lava. Its secret technique was a massive area of effect self-destruction. Any guard without a Tegu who so much as brushed against the flames was burned alive. The scene turned into a living hell, with countless human torches screaming in agony. Bowles felt a pang of guilt as he silently apologized to them in his heart, but this was a mission he had to complete. Meanwhile, Run went straight for the kill. His Tegu, 1,000-mile flight, was a winged Tegu, the massive wings on his back. With a flick of his feathers, he shot Finance Minister Jebez dead on the spot. Despite having a Tegu user as a bodyguard, Jebez stood no chance against the combined assault of the Jeggers. His bodyguard was quickly overwhelmed and fell in battle. Dr. Stylish, however, barely lifted a finger. As the team's medic, he had combat abilities, but this wasn't the time for him to use them. Just as Commander Esdeath said, the difficulty really wasn't high. Wave examined Jebez's corpse and muttered, as the head of public finance, he must have embezzled a ton of money if he was marked for elimination. Guess he got what was coming to him. I'll burn all the bodies. That should be best, Bowles said as he walked over. I'll leave it to you then. Wave nodded. It's nothing. This is what I should do. With that, Bowles used his Tegu to incinerate every corpse at the scene. Though the battlefield clearly showed traces of people having been burned alive, it didn't matter. This was an order from General Esdeath and Prime Minister Honest, no one would question it. While the 4 Jeggers carried out the mission, the 3 beasts had been watching them from the shadows. Run had a vague sense that they were being observed, but he assumed Esdeath had assigned them, so he kept quiet. Meanwhile, as the Jeggers assassinated Jebez, Blaine and Esdeath were already moving forward with their next operation. Chapter 139, Esdeath, I want to be on top. Prime Minister Honest wants us to protect a man named Billick. He's a spy the Prime Minister planted within the path of peace. He's gained the trust of the sect leader and now serves as his assistant, Esdeath said. But that's not the main point. The real issue is that the Prime Minister's 4 Rakshasa demons will most likely show up as well. If they do, that's ideal. If not, we'll just take care of Billick while we're at it. The Path of Peace? Is that a religious organization? Blaine asked, puzzled. The name alone made it sound like one. That's right. It's a religious group that suddenly emerged among the people. I've heard that the sect leader is incredibly charismatic and has strong leadership skills, which is why the Path of Peace has grown so rapidly. Esdeath explained. Well, let's not worry about this religious group for now. Let's just deal with the target, Blaine said indifferently. Still, he couldn't help but take note of the Path of Peace. It all depended on where these people stood. If they wanted to rebel now, that was their business. But if they refused to fall in line after he overthrew Honest's regime, then they would have to face the consequences. For now, we'll act like we're here to protect Billick and see if the 4 Rakshasa demons show up, Esdeath said. The Path of Peace stronghold lay far to the east of the imperial capital. Over time, the organization had expanded into a massive city, home to a vast number of followers. By now, Blaine and Esdeath had already arrived in its territory. Everyone here was a devout believer. The Lord. The Lord. A large crowd had gathered, surrounding the leader on the stage. The leader wore a stag skull atop his head. With a simple raise of his hand, the thousands gathered below instantly fell silent. This world is filled with sorrow. The leader began his sermon. His message was simple: life was full of hardship, with people suffering from hunger and poverty. But precisely because of these struggles, one's resolve must not waver. They had to continue doing good, for one day, good would be rewarded. But, my lord, if we keep doing good, won't it all be meaningless once we die? Someone in the crowd asked hesitantly. The leader fell silent for a moment before speaking calmly. Even if life ends, it is only the body that perishes. The soul remains in this world, and in the end, it will find happiness in the kingdom of God. His words silenced all doubts. Just yesterday, a man stepped into the kingdom of God to protect his younger brother from a danger beast. His name was Akame, and I will never forget this hero for as long as I live. The leader's expression was solemn and full of remembrance. Blaine and Esdeath blended into the crowd, unnoticed as all eyes remained fixed on the sect leader. Listening to his words, Blaine thought that the path of peace wasn't so bad. At the very least, it wasn't some cult built purely on brainwashing. The people below were deeply moved, especially the younger brother the leader had spoken of. He stood in the crowd, tears streaming down his face. The Lord. He even remembers my brother's name. Beside him, his brother's wife was also weeping with gratitude. The leader then gave another example, recalling even the identification number of a deceased follower of the Path of Peace. His remarkable memory only deepened the people's reverence for him. So you see, death is not the end. Their names and memories will always live on in this world. The crowd erupted into cheers. The Lord. The Lord. They called out his name in fervent devotion. Behind the leader stood a bearded man. This was Bullock, the secondary target of Blaine and Esdeath. Their main target, of course, was the 4 Rakshasa demons. With his Mangekyo Sharingan, Blaine could clearly see the sinister smile on Bullock's face behind the sect leader. After all, he was a mole. Blaine and Esdeath were in the dressing room, changing into formal attire. Bullock was hosting a banquet, and they were among the invited guests. Blaine donned a white suit, while Esdeath wore a striking red evening gown. Upon arriving at the banquet hall, they saw a large crowd and tables filled with lavish food. Bullock sat in the center like a noble, attended by several veiled maids. Sigh. Lately, the sense of crisis has been growing stronger, so I requested assistance from the Prime Minister. Seeing the icy beauty before him, Bullock sighed in relief. I never expected the one to come in person would be General Esdeath, the Empire's strongest. Now I can finally relax. This banquet is attended only by my most loyal subordinates, so please, General Esdeath and this gentleman, enjoy yourselves. Since Bullock didn't recognize Blaine, he could only refer to him as this gentleman. The Prime Minister sent us to protect you. Just arrange a room for us. Esdeath said casually, not revealing their true purpose. Of course, no problem. My mansion is quite interesting. Bullock gave a knowing smile, clearly referring to the maids in his estate. Blaine remained expressionless, completely uninterested. Esdeath also showed no reaction. Although she found Bullock's remark distasteful, something else held her attention. She had already detected 4 unusual presences hiding in the ceiling. Most likely, they were the 4 Rakshasa demons. We have no interest in that. What I'd rather see is the people spying on us from above. Esdeath said coolly. As expected of General Esdeath, you noticed them so quickly. Bullock said in surprise. He snapped his fingers, signaling for the hidden figures to reveal themselves. These are the ones who helped me take control of the entire Path of Peace. The 4 Rakshasa demons from the Imperial Fist Temple. Bullock introduced. So you really are here. Esdeath smiled faintly as she looked at them. At that moment, one of the 4 Rakshasa demons, Ibara, decided to show off. He chose Blaine as his target, assuming he was less formidable than Esdeath. In a flash, he moved like a specter, appearing behind Blaine. Of course, he didn't intend to attack just to startle him a little. However, Blaine had already seen through his movements. Predicting Ibara's approach, he turned and caught him by the throat in one swift motion. When Ibara was utterly shocked. His opponent's reaction speed had outpaced his own movements. I have no interest in playing with you. But I wouldn't mind sending you on your way. Blaine said flatly. Esdeath chuckled. You really picked the wrong target. He is even stronger than I am. This. How is that possible? Ibara was in disbelief. General Esdeath was universally recognized as the Empire's strongest, yet this young man was supposedly stronger than her? Not just Ibara, Bullock and the other 3 Rakshasa demons were also stunned. They had assumed Blaine was just Esdeath's lackey. None of them had imagined he could surpass her. I overstepped. Realizing the danger he was in, Ibara quickly apologized. He could have struggled free from Blaine's grip, but if this man truly was as strong as Esdeath claimed, angering him would be a death sentence. Blaine released his grip, and Ibara let out a quiet sigh of relief. He hadn't killed them immediately. He wanted to see if these 4 had any value. If not, disposing of them later wouldn't be an issue. Blaine then exchanged a few words with the 4 Rakshasa demons, learning their names: Ibara, Sten, Suzuka, and Mez. Ibara, the one who had just tested him, was shirtless, well-built, with black eyes. Sten was even more muscular than Ibara. He had a bald head, a thick beard, and carried a wine flask at his waist. Suzuka was tall and slender, dressed in a tight-fitting martial arts uniform. Her messy black hair had 2 strands of bells hanging from her ears. Mez was a tanned girl with blonde hair, green eyes, and a striking figure. Her outfit was quite revealing, and her youthful face carried an air of playfulness. General Esdeath just said you're stronger than her. Is that true? Mez, clearly the more outgoing of the group, wasted no time asking questions. It's true. Blaine answered with a slight nod. Meanwhile, Esdeath was in conversation with Bullock. Wow. So there really is someone stronger than General Esdeath. Ibara, you almost caused a huge mess just now. Mez teased. Ibara could only sulk in silence, unable to argue. At the banquet, Blaine and Esdeath hadn't done much for the time being. After the banquet ended, it was already late, so they decided to stay the night. Although Esdeath had claimed to have no interest in such things, she hadn't outright refused, so Bullock still sent a few maid-servants to attend to Blaine. It was precisely because Bullock had learned that Blaine was even stronger than Esdeath that he wanted to ensure Blaine received the best hospitality possible. What Bullock didn't anticipate, however, was that this would displease Esdeath. As the maidservants approached the room, they were surprised to find Esdeath already inside with Blaine. Even so, they paid it little mind and proceeded with Lord Bullock's orders. They had no choice but to obey him. What are you doing here? Esdeath's voice was cold as she questioned them. We are here to serve Lord Blaine. If Lady Esdeath has any requests, we can inform Lord Bullock. One of the maids replied. They had even thoughtfully considered Esdeath's needs. There's no need. Leave. Esdeath's tone was indifferent. But we. The maids hesitated, suddenly feeling at a loss. What they failed to realize was that Esdeath was already at the brink of anger. Tell that man Blaine is mine. If this happens again. You understand, don't you? Her voice was laced with unmistakable killing intent. Why yes. Understood. Terrified by her icy, bone-chilling gaze, the maids hurriedly retreated. One, who was lagging behind, even scrambled back to shut the door properly before leaving. Esdeath promptly locked the door, then turned to Blaine. There. Now we won't be disturbed. You make it sound like we're about to do something that can't be known. Blaine let out a slightly awkward chuckle. Well, it's better if no one interrupts us. After all, we're about to. As she spoke, Esdeath slowly began to undress. Blaine finally realized something was off. Wait, what are you? I've noticed you have quite a few women around you. Esdeath stated bluntly. So I figured I should take the lead. She then added with a smirk, but I'll be on top. You just lie there. Chapter 140. Good morning, my dear. Since Blaine was surrounded by so many women, which greatly displeased Esdeath, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Are you serious? Blaine's eyes widened slightly. Until now, he'd assumed Esdeath was clueless about such things and just treated him like a pillow. He never expected her to suddenly make a move like this. You just need to lie there and behave. I may not be able to beat you in a duel, but in this, I will win at least once. Esdeath looked full of determination, as if she were preparing for battle. If not for the fact that she was already down to her underwear, one might have thought she was about to engage in a life-or-death fight. Then again, depending on how one looked at it, it could still be considered a battle. Without another word, Esdeath used sheer force to pin Blaine down onto the bed. Blaine didn't resist after all. It wasn't like she was trying to hurt him. Instead, he spoke calmly. Maybe you should cool down a little first? What's there to cool down about? Or, do you not like me? Esdeath's expression darkened slightly. It's not that. I just don't want you to act on impulse and end up regretting it later. Blaine explained. That's impossible. I like you, so there's nothing to regret. Esdeath replied matter-of-factly. Then, without another word, she tore off Blaine's clothes. Although Esdeath started off in control, the tide quickly turned. Her confidence and composure gave way to flustered reactions and awkward attempts to hide her embarrassment, but in the end, she was no match for Blaine. After all, every aspect of Blaine's physical abilities had been enhanced by the system, making his stamina and endurance skyrocket. While Esdeath was naturally strong, she still fell short in comparison. Her greatest advantage lay in her mastery of the Tegu, Demon's Extract. No one was more compatible with it than her, and she could even develop new abilities with it, something few other Tegu users could achieve. But in this situation, using the Tegu's power would be outright cheating. Doing so would mean admitting defeat, and Esdeath's pride wouldn't allow that. Yet, despite her resolve, she found herself losing to Blaine once again. To Asdith, yielding before Blaine did was tantamount to failure. However, rather than discouraging her, this defeat only fueled her fighting spirit even more. She had no intention of letting Blaine off the hook for the rest of the night. "You're the only man who can make me feel this way. But don't think you'll be getting any rest tonight." With flushed cheeks, she kissed him again, giving him no chance to recover. The second round was even more intense than the first. By the time the night passed, Asdith had fallen asleep in Blaine's arms, completely satisfied. Compared to her soft, rosy complexion, Blaine looked noticeably drained. Even he had lost count of how many rounds they had gone through, only the overwhelming exhaustion remained. It felt as if his entire body had been wrung dry. Fortunately, his high constitution allowed him to recover quickly, as if nothing had happened. As he gathered his thoughts, Blaine realized that what had just happened with Asdith was far beyond what he had ever expected. And he hadn't used any protection either. Caught off guard by Asdith's sudden attack, he had no time to react. If something happened because of this, not that it would be a bad thing, but the sheer suddenness of it all left him in a daze. At the moment, exhaustion took priority over thinking. Letting out a deep breath, Blaine slowly drifted into sleep. By the time Blaine and Asdith woke up, it was almost noon. But no one disturbed them, no one would dare. Since Blaine's recovery ability was far superior to Asdith's, he woke up earlier than her. Using intangibility, he slipped out of the position where he'd been used as a pillow and even took a moment to tuck the blanket over Asdith. Yet, even that small movement was enough to wake her. She sat up and stretched, her thin nightgown outlining her alluring figure. "Looks like it's already noon. Last night was really intense." Feeling the warm sunlight streaming through the window, Asdith sighed. Even now, she could still feel the lingering effects of their night together, almost as if it wasn't quite enough. Then, without warning, she leaned in and planted a deep, affectionate kiss on Blaine's lips. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning." If not for the fact that there were more important things to do, Asdith's kiss might have just ignited Blaine's desire all over again. After changing into their formal attire, Blaine and Asdith headed out. "Let's start with the 4 Rakshasa demons, then deal with Bullock last." Blaine planned to settle everything here within the day. "Yesterday, you didn't kill Ibara outright. Were you thinking he might still be useful?" Asdith recalled the events of the previous day and asked. "If possible, bringing the 4 Rakshasa demons under our command wouldn't be a bad idea." Blaine nodded. "That works. It's worth a try." Asdith agreed without hesitation. "If they refuse, we'll just kill them." Near Bullock's mansion, Blaine and Asdith easily located the 4 Rakshasa demons. After all, their mission was to protect Bullock, so they wouldn't stray too far from his side. "Hello. Good afternoon, Lord Blaine and Lady Asdith." Mez greeted them cheerfully as soon as they met. However, her welcome was met with a ruthless response. Without any warning, Blaine and Asdith launched an attack on the 4 Rakshasa demons. Their strength was only that of average ego users, far below Blaine and Asdith's level. They had no chance to react to the sudden assault. "Don't move, or you'll be frozen solid in an instant." Asdith placed a hand on Ibara and Sten, subduing them effortlessly. Caught completely off guard, the two didn't dare move, knowing full well that Asdith could freeze them at any moment if they resisted. Blaine's methods weren't as convenient as Asdith's, but even against 2 women, he didn't hold back in the slightest. He grabbed Mez and Suzuka by the neck and slammed them to the ground. Mez and Suzuka weren't entirely powerless, but they were facing Blaine and Asdith. Given their lack of information on the situation, they didn't dare to resist recklessly, especially knowing that even if they did, they wouldn't stand a chance. However, something about Suzuka seemed off. There was no trace of pain on her face. Instead, a deep blush spread across her cheeks, and her hazy eyes made it seem as if she was actually enjoying the situation. Chapter 141, Suzuka's Eccentricity. Suzuka let out a strange sound. Blaine frowned slightly. "What's with this woman? Suzuka has some rather unusual preferences," Mez said with a pained expression. "But more importantly, Lord Blaine, Lady Asdith, why are you attacking us? We haven't done anything to offend you, have we?" "It's simple, we're enemies of Prime Minister Honest," Blaine replied indifferently. He wasn't in the mood for idle chatter, so he got straight to the point. "I'll give you 2 choices, submit or die." "That's not much of a choice," Mez muttered. "I understand, but I'm curious, why are you 2 opposing Prime Minister Honest?" Ibara, still not daring to move, cautiously asked the question. What a waste of words. Without hesitation, Asdith kicked Ibara to the ground. He tumbled forward, only for the sharp heel of her boot to press against the back of his head. Stan, watching from the side, couldn't help but marvel. As expected of General Asdith, just as ruthless as the rumors say. Struggling to lift his head, Ibara quickly conceded, I surrender." Immediately after, Sten and Mez followed suit. After all, If they wanted to live, they really had no other choice. Only Sasuke remained defiant. If I refuse, would Lord Blaine, then I'll kill you. Simple as that. Before she could finish, Blaine cut her off with a cold, matter-of-fact response. Already aware of Sasuke's peculiar tendencies, he wasn't surprised by her behavior. Alright then. Sasuke looked a little disappointed. I guess I'll just have to follow along. And with that, the 4 Rakshasa demons had officially submitted to Blaine and Esdeath. Blaine wasn't worried about them rebelling after all. The best way to keep them in check was to put them under Esdeath's command. Her subordinates, like the 3 beasts, were fiercely loyal to her, not out of fear, but genuine devotion. When it came to earning unwavering loyalty, Esdeath had a way with people. Your first task is to eliminate Bullock. This should be an easy job for you. Blaine ordered the 4 Rakshasa demons to take care of Bullock. While Bullock himself wasn't a powerful fighter, eliminating him was still necessary. He wasn't just a mole planted by Prime Minister Honest within the path of peace, he was also spreading drugs within its ranks. If left unchecked, countless civilians would eventually become addicts. No matter what, drugs had to be eradicated. If we complete the mission, will Lord Blaine grant me a reward? Sasuke's face flushed slightly. Her words could easily be misinterpreted, but Blaine knew exactly what she meant. She was looking for punishment. I have no interest in that kind of thing. If you really need it, you can ask Esdeath to help you. Blaine responded flatly. I'm not interested either. Esdeath replied just as coldly. She took pleasure in crushing her enemies with overwhelming power and trampling their dignity, not in indulging someone's masochistic tendencies. Not long after, Sasuke returned carrying Bullock's severed head. Along with Bullock's guards, anyone who had witnessed the 4 Rakshasa demons' assassination attempt had been eliminated. Chaos erupted within Bullock's mansion. Lord Blaine, please humiliate me to your heart's content. Sasuke placed a hand on her cheek, looking at Blaine expectantly. I'm not going to do that. Blaine sighed as he walked toward her. Then, just as he approached, a sharp slap landed across her face. Smack. The sound echoed through the air. Esdeath's expression immediately darkened. Without hesitation, she stepped forward. It was her turn to deal with Sasuke. She didn't use a weapon, nor did she activate her Tegu. Instead, she simply beat Sasuke down in pure hand-to-hand combat. She made sure not to inflict any serious injuries, but the beating was still harsh. Of course, for someone like Sasuke, one of the Imperial Fist Temple's top martial artists, recovering from ordinary wounds was no problem. After taking a severe thrashing from Esdeath, Sasuke lay still for a moment before getting up as if nothing had happened. Esdeath had successfully vented her frustration. Sasuke, on the other hand, looked absolutely thrilled. A win-win situation. At the same time, Sasuke made an interesting discovery. Provoking Blaine seemed to be the most effective way to anger Esdeath. Lord Blaine and Lady Esdeath each have their own unique ways of punishing people. And both are amazing. Sasuke felt like she had just found the most enjoyable experience possible. Ibara and Sten stood off to the side, watching with speechless expressions. If it had been them, they definitely wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of Esdeath's wrath. Sasuke looks like she's really enjoying herself. Mez chuckled. Amid the bizarre scene, Bullock's severed head lay discarded on the ground, completely out of place in the lively atmosphere. After handling the 4 Rakshasa demons and Bullock, Blaine and Esdeath left, with the 4 Rakshasa demons following closely behind. As for the path of peace, Blaine had no plans to intervene for the time being. His priority now was to gradually weaken Prime Minister Honest's influence. To speed up the process, Blaine and Esdeath had the Jaggers, 3 beasts, and 4 Rakshasa demons split up and operate separately, efficiently dismantling the forces surrounding the Prime Minister. Everyone in these 3 teams was either a Tegu user or possessed strength equivalent to 1. There was hardly anyone in the Imperial capital they couldn't assassinate, making their operations highly successful. It wasn't until Honest had lost a significant number of subordinates that he finally took notice. However, he remained oblivious to the fact that Blaine and Esdeath were behind it. Instead, he assumed the Night Raid had resumed their rampage in the capital and immediately summoned Esdeath to the royal palace, urging her to take action against them. Esdeath, keeping up her usual composure, maintained her act in front of Honest, ensuring he remained completely in the dark. Meanwhile, the headquarters of the Akatsuki organization had been completed. Its influence had already begun spreading into the imperial capital, using Esdeath and Arya's mansions as temporary bases. Both estates were spacious enough to accommodate a large number of people, with Esdeath's mansion being the most secure. By now, nearly all of Akatsuki's combat personnel had arrived in the imperial capital, leaving only a small number of guards and research staff back at the Seiga Cavern headquarters to continue developing new medicine. The latest formula significantly reduced side effects while maintaining a similar level of power enhancement as before. Commander Blaine, these 3 insisted on coming with us to the imperial capital, So we brought them along. A soldier led 3 individuals forward. They were none other than Tatsumi, Ayasu, and Seo. You came to the capital to make a name for yourselves? Blaine immediately recognized them. Among the villagers he had encountered, these 3 had left the strongest impression on him. After all, they never stopped talking about the imperial capital. That's right. We're grateful to you, Mr. Blaine, for helping our village overcome its hardships, but we can't just stay there forever. If we don't move forward, our village will eventually end up in the same situation again. Tatsumi spoke with unwavering determination. Not bad. Blaine admired their ambition, though he knew all too well that the imperial capital was far more dangerous than they could imagine. Just then, an idea crossed his mind. I can help you with this, but first, tell me, are you planning to enlist in the army? Yes. My dream is to serve the empire and rise through the ranks. Tatsumi answered without hesitation. We've trained hard for years just for this opportunity. I want to enlist as well, but since we're new here, we don't know much about the rules. I also added, with Seo nodding in agreement. You don't need to worry about that. I can introduce you directly to Great General Do. Blaine spoke casually. Great General Do? Though it was their first time in the capital, Tatsumi and his friends had long heard of General Do's reputation. Due to their village's isolation, however, they were unaware of Esdeath's rise to prominence and still believed Do was the empire's strongest warrior. Hearing that Blaine had a direct connection with such a powerful figure only deepened their admiration for him. Well, if you're fine with it, I can take you to meet General Do right now. Blaine continued. Whether he takes an interest in you or not will depend entirely on your own abilities. I understand. Let's go right away. Tatsumi could hardly contain his excitement. Ayasu and Seo weren't quite as mentally prepared, but with Tatsumi so eager, they had no choice but to steel themselves and follow along. Blaine led Tatsumi, Ayasu, and Seo to the royal palace, with Esdeath by his side. Prime Minister Honest was still unaware of Blaine and Esdeath's actions, allowing Blaine to move freely within the palace. Without hesitation, he brought the 3 newcomers directly before Great General Do. Blaine, why are you here with Esdeath? Do, known for his stern demeanor, frowned as soon as he saw Esdeath standing beside Blaine. Unaware of the current relationship between the two, he still viewed Esdeath as Prime Minister Honest's trusted enforcer and enemy. He's my lover. Why wouldn't I come with him? Esdeath responded without hesitation. Lover? Do's expression turned somewhat strange. Though he hadn't interacted much with Esdeath, he knew for certain that she was not only immensely powerful but also incredibly proud. First, he's my lover. Second, I lost to him recently, so I'm no longer aligned with the Prime Minister. Esdeath stated matter-of-factly. She made no effort to hide the truth from Do, as Blaine had assured her that Do was trustworthy at the very least. He would never stand on Honest's side. Hearing this, Do was momentarily stunned and instinctively turned to Blaine. What she said is true. Blaine confirmed with a nod. All right. Do had no choice but to accept it. Originally, he had considered Esdeath the greatest obstacle in eliminating Prime Minister Honest. But now, not only had Blaine dealt with her, he had even turned an enemy into his wife. Do couldn't help but reassess Blaine. If Esdeath had lost to him, then chances were he wouldn't be a match for Blaine either. I actually came here for something else. These 3 want to enlist in the army. Would you be willing to test their potential? Blaine gestured to Tatsumi and his companions. I can, but I require them to train under me for at least 10 days before I can properly evaluate them. Do replied. He was surprisingly agreeable with Blaine. If they're fine with it, then so am I. Blaine said. After all, this wasn't some fantasy world where talent could be measured instantly just by placing a hand on a stone tablet. 10 days was the bare minimum needed to gauge their growth potential. Naturally, Tatsumi and his friends had no objections. Over the next several days, Tatsumi, Ayasu, and Seo remained with Do for training. Meanwhile, Blaine and Esdeath had nearly completed their preparations. Aside from a few Tegu users stationed at the royal palace, nearly all of Prime Minister Honest's elite fighters had been dealt with, either recruited or eliminated. Now, only one step remained. Storm the palace. By this point, even if Honest had been oblivious before, it was impossible for him to ignore what was happening. He had lost too many subordinates at an abnormal rate, and Esdeath, whom he relied on the most, barely seemed to be taking action. Today, he would finally get his answer. Blaine led Esdeath, Seo, Kuram, and a dozen other Tegu users straight into the royal palace. While Do disliked seeing the sanctity of the palace violated, he understood that Blaine and his group had come for Honest. As a result, he ordered the royal guard under his command to stand down and personally headed for the Prime Minister. With the guards neutralized, the few Tegu users defending the palace were no match for Blaine's forces. The group cut through their opposition with overwhelming force, quickly reaching the chamber where the young emperor and Honest resided. However, upon arrival, Blaine saw only Honest. The young emperor was nowhere to be found, and the other officials had already fled. Asdeath. You. Honest's voice trembled slightly. Although he had already begun to suspect Asdeath, seeing her standing before him as an enemy still shocked him. Of all people, she should have been the least likely to betray him. What the hell had happened? Before he could gather his thoughts, the towering figure of Great General Do strode into the chamber. With both Asdeath, the Empire's so-called strongest, and Do standing against him, Honest felt an uncontrollable shiver run down his spine. Chapter 142, The Supreme Tegu. I'll handle this. Blaine said to Asdeath. Since Prime Minister Honest possessed an unknown Tegu, it was safest for Blaine to deal with him personally. Asdeath nodded slightly, offering no objections. Blaine had no intention of dragging this out. Without hesitation, he moved in to strike. Honest immediately panicked, but he reacted quickly, activating his Tegu's ability against Blaine. His plan was simple: destroy Blaine's Tegu, then take him hostage. Using Blaine as a bargaining chip would be his only chance of survival. After all, his Tegu, absolute limitation, Irastone, had the ability to destroy other Tegu. However, what Honest could never have predicted was that Blaine didn't have a Tegu at all. As soon as Blaine stepped within range, Honest activated his ability. A gemstone on his forehead shattered, signaling that the power had been unleashed. Confident that Blaine's Tegu had been destroyed, Honest charged in for close combat. But in just a few moves, he was utterly crushed. How is this possible? Your Tegu should have been destroyed. Bruised and bloodied, Honest cried out in disbelief after being kicked across the room like a ragdoll. There were only a handful of warriors with close combat prowess comparable to Asdeath. While Honest's own martial ability wasn't on Asdeath's level, he still believed handling a pretty boy like Blaine should have been easy. Yes. In Honest's mind, Blaine was nothing more than a weakling who had seduced Asdeath with his looks. He had no idea that Blaine had overpowered Asdeath through sheer strength. He had assumed Blaine was just another Tegu user who relied on his weapon rather than his own skills. And yet, he had been completely and utterly dominated. Tegu? I don't have one. Blaine said casually. So that was your ability, destroying other people's Tegu? Good thing I was the one to deal with you. He couldn't help but feel relieved. If Asdeath's Tegu had been destroyed, that would have been a major loss. In no time, Blaine beat Honest into unconsciousness. He didn't go for the kill. He didn't even use double Kamui. Ending Honest's life immediately would have been far too merciful. Blaine had bigger plans. The people of the Empire had suffered under Honest's rule for far too long. The best course of action was to hand him over to them. Let them be the ones to take justice into their own hands. It would not only give them closure but also help stabilize the Empire. Just as he was about to drag Honest's unconscious body away, a deafening commotion erupted outside the palace. Blaine frowned, tossing Honest aside as he turned toward the source of the disturbance. Asdeath and the others also took notice, but none of them knew what was happening. Only General Do reacted immediately, his expression darkening. It's His Majesty. The Emperor? What's wrong with him? Blaine asked as he approached. He's activated the Supreme Tegu. The Prime Minister must have convinced him to do it. Do growled, his face filled with anger. At that moment, an elderly man entered the chamber, leaning on a cane. It was the former Prime Minister, Tree, accompanied by his daughter, Spear, who stood protectively beside him. Lord Blaine, General Asdeath, I beg you please spare His Majesty. The Emperor has been deceived by that man, but I am certain he can change. Tree pleaded. When he first learned that Do had joined forces with Blaine to take down Honest, Tree had anticipated that something like this might happen. That's why he had rushed here as quickly as he could. The Empire still needed an emperor. The previous ruler had left behind only this one heir. If the current emperor were to die, the royal bloodline would be lost, and the Empire would descend into chaos. I know. I'm not going to kill him. I just need to make him stand down. Blaine said calmly. He had already considered the issue Tree was worried about. In reality, he had two choices: either overthrow the dynasty and take the throne himself, or allow the young emperor to remain in power. But Blaine had no interest in ruling as emperor. He wasn't suited for governance, nor did he need the title to satisfy any ambitions. With his strength, he was already the most powerful person in the world. A third option existed: abolishing the monarchy and transitioning to a republic. But such a drastic change wasn't something that could happen overnight. This world was nowhere near the level of the late Qing dynasty, where societal shifts had begun to pave the way for such ideas. It would be like trying to push the Tang or Song dynasties straight into a modern era, skipping centuries of historical development. Even if the emperor agreed, the people wouldn't be ready to accept it. Taking too big of a leap often led to disaster. Blaine understood his own limits. He was a traveler in this world, not a revolutionary. He had no illusions of single-handedly changing the course of history. "Thank you very much," Tree said gratefully. Blaine's decision not to overthrow the empire and establish a new dynasty came as a surprise to him. After all, how many people could resist the temptation of the emperor's throne? Blaine then stepped out of the palace and was immediately met with the sight of a colossal mecha, towering hundreds of meters high. It was draped in an enormous cloak, with the emperor's crown resting atop its head. This was the emperor's exclusive Tegu national defense machine god, Shikao Taser. "It's huge." Blaine couldn't help but think to himself. Unfortunately, he couldn't yet sustain the immense energy drain of a fully manifested Susanoo. Otherwise, he would have loved to pit a complete Susanoo against the Supreme Ego in a head-on clash. At that moment, Shikao Taser launched a barrage of artillery shells toward Blaine and the others. Each shell carried overwhelming destructive power. Great General Do had no choice but to take a defensive stance. His unwavering loyalty to the Emperor made it impossible for him to turn against His Majesty. Someone like him would never commit treason. Blaine swiftly donned his white mask, and the gun by Akaiwa appeared in his hand. He effortlessly absorbed every shell fired by Shikao Taser, converting the energy into wind and sending it back at the massive Tegu. Kaya return. This was likely the most powerful energy the gun by Akaiwa had ever absorbed. The returning gusts of wind tore through the palace buildings with ease and even left noticeable scratches on Shikao Taser's armored surface. But in the grand scheme of things, it was barely more than a scratch. Shikao Taser was known as the strongest Ego for a reason. Its offensive and defensive capabilities were unparalleled. Ordinary Tiga stood little chance of even damaging it. However, its true strength lay in large-scale warfare. It was originally forged by the first emperor 1,000 years ago to defend the imperial capital, and in the original story, the revolutionary army suffered devastating losses from its artillery outside the city. On the other hand, it wasn't as effective against individual opponents. Against top-tier Tigu users like Esdeath and Great General Do, its attacks were far less effective. And as it happened, Blaine was the perfect counter to this so-called Supreme Tigu. No matter how durable its armor was, the dojutsu of double Kamui completely bypassed physical defenses. Even if the young emperor activated Shikao Taser's secret technique, entering a berserker-like state where he lost all reason, it wouldn't change the fundamental nature of the mecha. "Let's wake you up properly first," Blaine said calmly. He then began allocating his available system points. Ding. The host has exchanged Constitution plus 150. Deducting system points minus 150. Ding. The host has exchanged Ocular Power plus 100. Deducting system points minus 100. Ding. The host has exchanged Strength plus 50. Deducting system points minus 50. Ding. The host has exchanged Agility plus 50. Deducting system points minus 50. Blaine nearly depleted all the system points he had accumulated over the past few days. With only a handful of points remaining, his attributes surged to a new level. Strength, 200, plus 10, Agility, 200, plus 10, Constitution, 500, plus 10, Ocular Power, plus 230. At the same time, Blaine activated Susanoo, pushing it straight to its third form. The newly formed Susanoo now had legs, building upon its second form. Its size had at least doubled, reaching nearly 100 meters tall. Reference, Madara's third form. Naturally, it retained the exclusive weapons of the second form as well. Though still smaller than Shikao Taser, its sheer presence was enough to create an overwhelming sense of power. But Blaine wasn't here to compare size, he was here to obliterate Shikao Taser as efficiently as possible. Blaine's power has grown even stronger than last time, Esdeath said excitedly, gazing up at Susanoo. Kurom had witnessed Blaine's second form Susanoo before, and even then, she had been shocked. She never imagined that it wasn't his limit. At that moment, Blaine commanded Susanoo to swing its massive Teki horizontally toward Shikao Taser. Shikao Taser likely couldn't withstand a standard strike from Susanoo's third form, but to ensure a decisive blow, Blaine took things a step further. He enchanted the weapon. The colossal blade, now imbued with Kamui's power, sliced through Shikao Taser as if it were mere tofu, cutting it cleanly in half. What? Inside the Shikao Taser, the young emperor was utterly shocked. Inexperienced in battle, he panicked at the overwhelming sight before him. But even if he had managed to stay calm, there was nothing he could have done. The Shikao Taser, now split cleanly in two, collapsed with a thunderous crash. It had been taken down by Blaine in an instant, almost effortlessly. Then again, there was likely no one in this world who could have withstood that attack. Blaine deactivated Susanoo and used his intangibility ability to phase into the Shikao Taser's cockpit, where he found the young emperor still inside, controlling the Tegu. The boy tried to resist, but with his frail and inexperienced body, he stood no chance against Blaine's strength. He was easily pulled out of the mecha. The young emperor groaned as he pushed himself up from the ground, his body aching. Looking around, He saw that the mighty generalist Eth and great General Do, once his strongest allies, had now turned against him. Realizing that he had lost everything, his expression grew hollow with despair. "I've lost. If you're going to kill me, just do it," he murmured hopelessly. "I have no intention of killing you," Blaine said calmly. "Besides, haven't you realized yet? That Prime Minister tricked you." "Prime Minister?" The young Emperor looked confused. "Your Majesty." At that moment, Tree hurried over, using his cane for support. He nearly stumbled in his rush. "You, Tree?" The young Emperor hadn't expected to see Tree, the minister who had once served his late father. "Your Majesty, you've been deceived this entire time. The late Emperor and the Empress were both assassinated by that Prime Minister." Tree revealed the long-buried truth. "You're saying he poisoned my father and mother? That's impossible. He would never do something like that." Even now, the young Emperor clung to his trust in Prime Minister Honest. "It's the truth. He poisoned both the late Emperor and the Empress," Tree insisted, his urgency growing as he struggled to make the boy believe him. Seeing the Emperor's stubbornness, Blaine came up with a solution. "If you don't believe us, then let him explain it to you himself." With that, Blaine turned and walked back into the palace, dragging out the still unconscious Honest. "As Deeth, I'll leave this to you." When it came to interrogations, it was best to let a professional handle it. As Deeth didn't hesitate. She knew exactly how to get answers. Her first move was to slam the sharp heel of her boot down onto Honest's face, shattering his nose instantly. The searing pain jolted him awake. "Ah!" His agonized screams filled the air. As Deeth wasted no time, methodically slicing into his flesh with her sword. It wasn't long before Honest broke down and spilled everything. Once she got the confession, as Deeth kicked him aside like a discarded corpse. Tree and his daughter, Spear, watched in horror. The sheer brutality of Asdeeth sent chills down their spines. If not for Blaine keeping her in check, they would have been terrified to be anywhere near her. Had Asdeeth remained loyal to Honest, toppling the Prime Minister would have been nearly impossible. And yet, just moments after mercilessly torturing Honest, Asdeeth casually wrapped herself around Blaine's arm, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 143, Atonement. After learning the truth from Prime Minister Honest, the young Emperor was filled with disbelief. He couldn't accept that the man he had always revered was the one who had orchestrated the deaths of his parents. But now, he had no choice but to face reality. "Now do you see the truth?" Blaine stepped forward, his tone indifferent. "I won't kill you, but you must atone for your past mistakes even if you were deceived by that Prime Minister. I suggest you go see the imperial capital with your own eyes, even venture beyond its walls, and witness the true condition of the people. Make improvements before the empire falls beyond saving. You should consider yourself fortunate. Many civil and military officials still remain loyal to you, former Prime Minister Tree and Great General Do among them." Blaine spoke at length to the young Emperor, but that was all he had to say. Now, it was up to him to decide. "I understand. I will see the empire for what it truly is." The young Emperor realized that he had likely been deceived by Prime Minister Honest all along. Having never left the palace, he had only ever known the version of the empire that Honest had described to him, a prosperous nation with only a minor issue of rebellious insurgents. And he had believed it. Honest had also insisted that the world outside the palace was dangerous, strongly discouraging him from leaving. True to his word, Blaine did not lay a finger on the young Emperor. "Lock this man in the dungeons," he ordered. "Tree will resume the position of Prime Minister. I trust you to assist the Emperor in addressing the Empire's crisis." In the following days, the young Emperor heeded Blaine's advice and embarked on a discreet tour of the imperial capital and its outskirts. The common people had never seen their ruler in person, and since he was dressed in plain clothes, no one recognized him. With the Imperial Guard and Tegu users secretly protecting him, there was no risk of unexpected danger. For the first time, the young Emperor saw the Empire's true state with his own eyes. It was nothing like the flourishing empire Honest had described. The streets were in shambles, the people suffering. It was a complete disaster. There was no doubt left he had been thoroughly deceived by Honest. "Prime Minister Tree, do I even deserve to continue ruling this land? I've let my ancestors' empire fall into ruin." Doubt consumed him. "Of course, Your Majesty," Tree reassured him. "As long as you rise to the occasion, you will surely regain the trust and loyalty of the people." Encouraged by Tree's words, the young Emperor straightened his posture. "Yes. I will change. I won't let my people down again. Your Majesty, I have a suggestion. Honest is the one responsible for the Empire's current state, and the people already despise him. I believe dealing with him publicly would be a strong first step." The young Emperor nodded. "I was already thinking the same thing. At first, I hesitated. But now, my mind is made up. He will be executed in public by slow slicing." He now understood how deeply he had been deceived, how he had allowed Honest to bring the empire to ruin. More than that, Honest had killed his parents. How could he feel anything but hatred toward him? There was no place for mercy, only the vengeance owed for regicide. Your Majesty is wise, Tree said, startled. He had only intended to suggest a public beheading. Saying something as extreme as execution by slow slicing in front of the emperor was another matter entirely. Yet the young emperor had made the decision himself. That, at least, was a good sign. It meant he had fully grasped Honest's treachery and was determined to turn the empire around. As soon as the young emperor returned to the palace after his disguised inspection, he immediately ordered Prime Minister Honest to be dragged from the dungeons and publicly executed in the streets. The moment the news spread, the entire imperial capital erupted. The execution site was soon packed with civilians eager to witness the event. People always loved a spectacle. Even if the condemned was an unknown nobody, there would still be a crowd, with some wealthy individuals even purchasing pieces of flesh from the executed. But this time, the man facing execution was none other than Prime Minister Honest, the most despised man in the empire. What the hell is going on? How did the Prime Minister, who held absolute power, suddenly end up being executed? There must have been a coup inside the palace. Didn't a giant monster appear there a few days ago? Someone must have overthrown the Prime Minister by force. This is amazing. That wicked minister is finally dead. And we get to see him suffer. Just thinking about it is satisfying. So who's the new Prime Minister? Is it the former one? I remember things were much better under his rule than now. As the crowd continued their heated discussions, the execution formally began. Honest's exceptional physical condition worked against him. The executioner's blade carved into his flesh, but his strong body refused to give in to death, prolonging his suffering. His agonized screams echoed for what seemed like an eternity. The executioner efficiently carried out the entire process of death by 1,000 cuts. And only when Honest's head was finally severed did the execution came to an end. The gathered crowd watched with satisfaction. The execution had lasted so long that many had brought their meals, eating as they watched, their appetites seemingly undisturbed by the gruesome spectacle. It was then, while the people had yet to disperse, that the young emperor emerged from behind the scenes. His royal attire and the crown upon his head made his identity unmistakable, even to those who had never seen him before. The chaotic scene fell into a sudden silence. All eyes widened in shock, and the air grew still. No one had expected the emperor himself to appear here. I am the emperor of this empire, he declared, his voice carrying over the hushed crowd. But I have failed in my duty as ruler. I was kept in the dark by former Prime Minister Honest, but now I see his true face for what it was. He looked over the assembled people. It was Mr. Blaine, General Esdeath, and the others who opened my eyes. Mr. Blaine is a true hero, and for that, I am deeply grateful to him. Chapter 144, the show is about to begin. The young emperor sincerely admitted his mistakes to his people. This scene left everyone in shock. They could hardly believe that His Majesty would speak to them in such a way. Naturally, his actions had a profound effect. Not only did the young emperor's reputation improve, but Blaine's name also spread like wildfire across the imperial capital, as the emperor publicly credited him for his achievements. Furthermore, the young emperor announced a series of reforms aimed at benefiting the people, including tax reductions and aid for refugees. Although the empire had fallen into corruption and darkness under Prime Minister Honest's rule, he had only been in power for less than 3 years. It hadn't been long enough to bring about a complete financial collapse. In reality, the imperial treasury was still quite wealthy. The problem was that nearly the entire court had been filled with corrupt officials who had fawned over Honest, siphoning away funds that should have gone to the people. Now that Honest had fallen, Tree, with the support of Blaine and Great General Doe, immediately launched a purge of these corrupt officials. These officials had grown so brazen under Honest's protection that evidence of their crimes was abundant, making it easy to seize their assets. A massive sum of money was promptly confiscated and redistributed as subsidies to the people. To be fair, while the young emperor had nearly driven the empire to ruin, its economy and military had not yet crumbled. In fact, they remained relatively stable. At this, even Chongzhen, the last emperor of the Ming dynasty who hanged himself as his empire fell, would have shed tears. Did I really hear that right? His Majesty actually spoke to us like this? So it was Blaine who overthrew Prime Minister Honest? I remember he was the captain of the Imperial Capital Security Force, and there were rumors that he was General Esdeath's lover. Yeah, it's definitely him. No wonder he caught General Esdeath's attention. He actually managed to bring down Honest. If what His Majesty says is true, could we finally be heading toward a golden age? Seeing the Emperor's new stance, the people began to feel hope for the future. After hearing about the young Emperor's actions, Blaine felt that he truly wanted to atone for his past mistakes. Blaine was quite satisfied with his efforts. The Empire's internal affairs don't need much attention for now. The next focus will be the Revolutionary Army and the foreign tribes. I've already sent Chelsea back to notify the night raid they can begin their operation. Blaine said. So, we're putting on a show of hostility with night raid? That means I won't be able to fight them seriously. Edith remarked with a faint smile. That's right. You'll need to hold back a little, don't go all out against them. Blaine said with a slightly awkward smile, reminding her. His lineup was overwhelmingly powerful. Aside from himself, Edith, and Great General Do, there was also So, Kurum, Akatsuki, the Jaggers, the Three Beasts, and the Four Rakshasa Demons. If an actual battle broke out, Night Raid wouldn't stand a chance. Even if the entire Revolutionary Army charged in, it would be meaningless. For now, Blaine just needed to wait for Najanda's report. She had already gone to the Revolutionary Army's headquarters for discussions, though, of course, the staged battle was not part of those talks. At the moment, only Blaine's group and Night Raid were in on the act. Within 2 days, Najanda returned with news. Most members of the Revolutionary Army supported taking a wait-and-see approach toward the Empire. If the Emperor and Prime Minister Trey could govern the nation well, they were willing to step back from their efforts to overthrow the regime. This group mainly consisted of lower-ranking revolutionaries or former imperial officials like Najanda, who had defected to the Revolutionary Army. On the other hand, those who opposed this idea were the Revolutionary Army's leader, certain high-ranking officers, and their loyal followers. Najanda gradually realized the truth: the leader had no intention of compromise because he wanted to overthrow the Empire and claim the throne for himself. If the Empire stabilized, his ambitions would be crushed. I have no intention of compromising either. When the time comes, Night Raid will stop at nothing to assassinate the Emperor. Najanda said, choosing her words carefully. The Emperor has been traveling frequently, making it easy to find the right opportunity for an assassination. Once he is dead, the royal bloodline will be severed, and the Empire will be unable to sustain itself. The people of this world, or rather this era, were still deeply entrenched in feudal beliefs. Legitimacy was of utmost importance. If a ruler lacked rightful succession, the people would never accept them. If the young emperor were to die now, the empire would inevitably collapse. Someone else could take the throne, but that would effectively mean the end of the current dynasty. Of course, Najanda was saying this purely to test the leader's reaction. Very well. I'll leave this difficult task to you. The Revolutionary Army's leader, a middle-aged man, responded. He spoke little, but in his mind, he was already planning how to use this opportunity to destroy the Imperial Army led by Blaine. His strategy still hinged on allying with the foreign tribes. As long as he could seize ultimate power, what did it matter if he had to cede some territory? Blaine's unexpected presence had completely disrupted his original plans, giving him a major headache. No matter what, this time, he had to eliminate this threat. The Emperor would never travel unprotected. But after Night Raid clashed with Blaine and his forces, they would undoubtedly suffer heavy losses. That would be the perfect moment to join forces with the foreign tribes and crush them completely. The leader's plan sounded good if only he knew he had already fallen into Najanda's trap. By the way, I heard you still don't have a suitable tegu. It just so happens that I have a biological tegu that I can give you. The leader said. He even went so far as to strengthen Najanda's power. A moment later, a towering man with 2 horns on his head walked into the room. Let me introduce you. This is the biological tegu, the speed of lightning Susanoo. His abilities are formidable, and his secret technique allows him to absorb his master's life force to enter a berserk state, greatly enhancing his strength. With that, the leader handed over the humanoid tegu to Najanda. Najanda was slightly surprised at such a critical juncture. Night Raid was gaining another member. Still, it shouldn't pose a problem. Biological tegu were said to be completely loyal to their masters once bonded, so there was no risk of their plans with Blaine being exposed. While Najanda was bringing Susanoo back to the Night Raid base, the Revolutionary Army's leader secretly resumed negotiations with the foreign tribes. The northern tribes had been nearly annihilated by Edith, and the southern tribes weren't much better off. They had also been crushed by her. Only the western tribes remained strong, keeping a watchful eye on the Empire's western border. The Revolutionary Army's leader had to find a way to unite the remnants of the northern and southern tribes while also negotiating terms with the powerful western tribes. Previously, he had promised to return territories that originally belonged to the western tribes, but at the time, they had only agreed to launch an incursion into the Empire's western border to create chaos. They had not agreed to fully cooperate in surrounding the imperial capital. If he wanted them to commit more forces this time, he would have to offer them greater concessions. The western tribes, seeing an opportunity, made exorbitant demands, seeking even more of the Empire's territory. In his desperation to succeed, the Revolutionary Army's leader reluctantly agreed. However, he wasn't planning to launch a direct siege on the imperial capital while Night Raid battled Blaine's forces. Instead, his strategy was to erode the Empire's strength gradually through an alliance with the foreign tribes. He knew that Blaine was incredibly strong, but fortunately, the Emperor's supreme Tegu had been destroyed. That had been their biggest fear. The Imperial Army soldiers were undisciplined and had long since fallen into complacency. The only real threats were Blaine, Asdeath, and Great General Do. As long as he could rally enough foreign warriors and Tegu users, victory was only a matter of time. For now, he would wait for the right moment to act. The key lay in how successful Night Raid's operation would be. As soon as Najunda returned to the Night Raid base, she gathered the entire team and headed to discuss matters with Blaine. On the way, she had already spoken with Susanoo, explaining her true intentions. After confirming that once bonded, he would be absolutely loyal, she was reassured. So most of them agree, but the leader and the upper ranks oppose it? Now that's interesting. Blaine mused, nodding slowly. We'll proceed with our usual plan and see how things unfold. Oh, I just hope that when the time comes, Blaine, Asdeath, and General Do go easy on us. Leone said with a grin. Don't worry, I won't do anything that Blaine would disapprove of. Asdeath replied, surprisingly mild-mannered in her interactions with Night Raid. Great General Do remained silent, his expression stern as he looked at the Night Raid members. To him, they were still rebels. However, out of respect for Blaine, he restrained himself from voicing his disapproval. Kurum, make sure to dodge my attacks when the time comes. Akame reminded her sister. Don't worry, sis, I won't go down that easily. Kurum replied with a bright smile, hugging Akame tightly. Before the staged battle began, the Night Raid members stayed at the Akatsuki base. That evening, dinner was prepared by Susanoo. Aside from his combat prowess, he was an incredibly skilled housekeeper, mastering over 1,000 different dishes. He could tailor meals to everyone's preferences, making this the most extravagant dinner they'd had in a long time. With so many people around, even Akame and Kurum lent a hand. Not that they were looking for an excuse to sneak bites of food, definitely not. While waiting for dinner, Najunda stepped outside for a smoke. Just then, Asdeath happened to walk past behind her. Najunda suddenly recalled something and remarked, Asdeath. It's kind of unbelievable. Someone like you, who craves battle and bloodshed, actually fell in love with a man. She had always found it surprising, but this was the first chance she had to say it directly. Isn't that just a beast's instinct? Nothing strange about it. Asdeath replied casually. Najunda sighed. Only you would compare yourself to a beast. If I'm not mistaken, that green-haired kid seems to have feelings for you, doesn't he? Asdeath suddenly asked, cutting straight to the point. After observing their interactions during both this meeting and the previous one, she had noticed that Lubbock the green-haired boy seemed to have a thing for Najunda. Ever since coming to understand love herself, Asdeath had become surprisingly perceptive in such matters. For instance, she had already picked up on the affections Kurum, So, Chelsea, and mine harbored for Blaine. That was why she had been so decisive in sealing the deal with Blaine before anyone else could. Cough. Najunda nearly choked on her own cigarette upon hearing Asdeath's words. She hadn't expected such a question. Seeing her reaction, Asdeath smirked knowingly. So you're aware of his feelings? What, you're not planning to do anything about it? Najunda's expression turned somewhat troubled. What are you even saying? Now's not the time for that. The Revolutionary Army, the foreign tribes, everything is still in chaos. At the very least, once all of that is settled, I might consider giving it a shot. You're still as naive as ever. Asdeath said with a small smile before turning away. Their perspectives were clearly worlds apart. To Asdeath, there was no need to overthink things. If you wanted something, you simply took it. Without another word, she walked off, leaving Najunda alone with her thoughts, quietly finishing her cigarette. Even after Asdeath left, Najunda found herself thinking about Lubbock. Asdeath was right, she had always known how he felt about her. Lubbock had been a wealthy young man, living a privileged life. Yet he had abandoned it all to join the Revolutionary Army for her. The reason she had never responded wasn't just because the current situation was unstable. It was also because she wasn't emotionally prepared. When it came to love, she was completely inexperienced. Maybe Asdeath was right. Maybe she was a little naive. Najunda couldn't help but admire Asdeath. Even when standing on opposite sides, she had been bold enough to openly pursue Blaine without hesitation. Chapter 145, Sura within the Empire, outside the Imperial capital. A tall, muscular man with dark skin and silver hair strode toward the Imperial capital. A gruesome, crisscrossing scar ran between his eyes. Behind him followed 5 individuals, each with an unusual presence. Their attire differed from that of the Empire's citizens, suggesting they came from various parts of the world. I'm finally back. I wonder how my old man is doing. the silver-haired man said, a pleased smile forming as he gazed toward the capital. Sura, you said your father is a minister of the empire. That means meeting Dr. Stylish should be easy, right? A blonde girl in black and white striped stockings asked him. Of course. I did promise you. Sura replied with a grin. Yes, he was Sura, the only son of Prime Minister Honest. However, he was completely unaware that his father was already dead, executed in a brutal, drawn-out manner. As Sura and his 5 companions entered the city gates, they immediately noticed something strange about the guards' expressions. Are you really the son of a prime minister? Not only are they not kneeling when they see you, but they're staring at you like that. The blonde girl remarked bluntly. I noticed it too. Something's off. Might as well ask them directly. Without hesitation, Sura suddenly lunged at the city gate guards. Even without using a tegu, his sheer physical strength was evident. He didn't hold back, beating them half to death first, then questioning them afterward. With several guards already battered, the rest were too terrified to make a sound, averting their gazes entirely. Sura planted his foot on one of the fallen guard's chests, making him cough up blood. Well? Do you have a problem with showing me the respect I deserve? Under Sura's intimidation, one of the guards finally spoke up, revealing the truth: Prime Minister Honest was dead. Sura was momentarily stunned, then, for some reason, he burst into laughter. What a useless old man. Dead is dead. I was going to surpass him sooner or later anyway. He said indifferently. But what interests me more is who had the strength to kill him. That old man was no pushover. Like father, like son, just as in the original story, where Honest showed no sorrow upon hearing of Sura's death at Lubbock's hands. Sura then resorted to torture, forcing the guards to reveal who was responsible for his father's demise. It was the Emperor who gave the order for Honest's execution, but the one who truly brought him down was a man named Blaine. Sura stroked his chin. Oh? Blaine? Interesting. I'd like to see just how strong he is, strong enough to bring down my father. He had gathered 5 powerful warriors from across the world, and he was looking for a way to put their skills to the test. Now, he had the perfect reason: revenge. Chapter 146, Shambhala. Even after learning that his father had been killed and that his situation had taken a dire turn, Sura still strutted through the streets without a care. Not only was he unafraid, but he was also eager to see just how powerful this so-called Blaine really was. However, Sura had overlooked a crucial detail, as Teeth had already aligned herself with Blaine, and even Great General Do was nearly under his influence. As always, Sura acted on his whims, killing anyone who displeased him and assaulting any woman he took a liking to. But the imperial capital was no longer the lawless city it once was. Under the reforms of the Emperor and Prime Minister Tree, along with the covert support of Blaine's Akatsuki organization, the city's security had vastly improved. The once inept imperial capital security force was no longer a useless band of freeloaders. Now, the security force had been reorganized, with many of its members coming from the Akatsuki organization. Sura had even taken charge as its captain, a position she personally requested from Blaine in her desire to maintain law and order. In truth, Sura and her comrades now held dual identities, both as members of the Imperial Capital Security Force and the Akatsuki organization. This applied to Wave, Run, and the others as well. They served Blaine while also upholding order in the city. After all, both the security force and Akatsuki were ultimately under Blaine's command. So, when Sura and his gang ran rampant through the streets, the security force quickly mobilized. At that moment, Sura was causing trouble in the restaurant. He had taken a liking to a beautiful woman dining there and decided to claim her on the spot. Reaching out, he grabbed the woman's clothes and kicked her young son away. Yeah. The woman let out a terrified scream. Stop right there. The guards accompanying her immediately rushed forward to intervene. But Sura casually sent them flying with a single kick. The gap in strength was undeniable. Sura was a Tegu user, and even without using his weapon, his sheer combat prowess was on par with an average Tegu user. Who the hell are you? That woman is Lieutenant Bork's wife. You'd better think carefully about the consequences. Hearing this, the remaining guards hesitated, too afraid to act recklessly. Lieutenant Bork? Sura sneered arrogantly. And what does that matter? My father was the prime minister through the old bastard's already dead. He then turned to the 5 individuals accompanying him. Take care of these noisy flies. I have more important business to attend to. The 5 standing behind Sura were Aizo, Dorothea, Cosmina, Inshin, and Champ. Aizo had the appearance of a Japanese samurai, a blade of grass hanging from his lips. He always kept his eyes closed, only opening them when preparing to fight. A katana named Kausetsu hung from his waist. Dorothea, a seemingly innocent blonde girl with a butterfly-shaped ribbon, was in fact an aged alchemist who maintained her youthful appearance using the Tegu blood collection, Absordex. Cosmina, a striking beauty with short, fluffy hair, wore a revealing bunny girl outfit. A pair of glasses sat on her nose, and her eyes sparkled with an eerie, star-like gleam. Inshin was tall and wiry, dressed like a pirate. In truth, he was one hired by Sura from the southern region islands. He wielded the Tegu moonlight sword dance, Shamshir. Finally, there was Champ, a hulking figure clad in a clown's outfit and mask. Though he appeared overweight, his body was pure muscle. His Tegu was Chaos Throw, Big Leaguer. Of the six, only Aizawa was not a Tegu user. However, his demon sword, Kausetsu, was a special blade, and his swordsmanship was so refined that his strength surpassed even that of most Tegu users. Kausetsu. Aizawa gently stroked his sword as if soothing a beloved pet. Then, in an instant, he vanished. The next moment, he was behind the guards. They hadn't even realized what had happened. Suddenly, deep gashes appeared across their bodies, and their limbs fell apart in bloody pieces. The young boy, still clutching his aching stomach from Sura's earlier kick, barely had time to register the horror before him. His face twisted in terror, and he collapsed into unconsciousness. Considering what was likely to happen next, losing consciousness might have been a mercy. "TSK, you're too fast. You didn't even leave any for us." Dorothea pouted as she watched Aizawa make quick work of the guards. By now, Sura had already torn the woman's top. Inshin had also set his sights on his own prey. Like Sura, he was both ruthless and depraved. Champ, however, was the worst of them all. He had a sick fascination with children regardless of gender. But if given the choice, he undoubtedly preferred little girls. To him, children were like angels. He abhorred the thought of them growing up into what he saw as filthy adults. That was why, after violating them, he would brutally kill them, ensuring they would never live long enough to become tainted. "Stop right there." Suddenly, a voice rang out. The Imperial Capital Security Force had arrived. Upon witnessing the gruesome scene before her, Sura, as captain of the security force, was consumed with fury. "Koro. Charge. Punish those evildoers." Sura's once adorable face twisted into a ferocious snarl as she brandished her massive sword and charged straight at Sura. She was accompanied by members of the original Akatsuki organization, or rather, the Empire's assassination unit, along with Wave, Run, Bowles, and Dr. Stylish. "Captain Sura, be careful." Seeing how recklessly she rushed ahead, Wave couldn't help but call out in concern. Meanwhile, the moment Run laid eyes on Champ, his expression subtly shifted as if he recognized him. Sura's sudden assault forced Sura to release the beautiful woman for the time being, narrowly dodging the slash of her greatsword. From that single strike alone, Sura could tell she was no pushover. His brow furrowed as he clicked his tongue in irritation. "TSK, I was just getting to the good part." Aizawa and the others sprang into action, and a fierce battle erupted. Wave immediately activated his Tegu, Grand Chariot, encasing his entire body in armor. Run and Bowles also unleashed their respective Tegus, ready for combat. As the fight wore on, Sura quickly realized that these opponents were no ordinary foot soldiers. Several of them were Tegu users, and their combined strength was formidable. He was taken aback. Weren't these guys from the Imperial Capital Security Force? Since when had they become this strong? Annoyed that his refined pleasures were being interrupted, Sura decided to use his own Tegu, dimensional formation, Shambhala. The moment he activated its ability, a massive glowing circle appeared beneath Sura and the others. In the blink of an eye, everyone within its radius was instantly teleported away. What? Caught off guard, Sura and her team had no knowledge of Sura's Tegu or its abilities. The teleportation happened so swiftly that they had no time to react before they were completely removed from the battlefield. Still as handy as ever. Sura smirked as he glanced at the Tegu in his hands. However, Shambhala had a drawback: it required a long cooldown after each use. With those nuisances gone, there was no one left to interfere. Just as Sura turned to approach the weeping woman clutching her child, a strikingly beautiful woman in a military uniform strode into the room, her expression cold and unreadable. Another fool who doesn't know their place? Sura turned and immediately recognized her. It was Esdeath. "Huh? Well, if it isn't General Esdeath," he exclaimed in surprise. The moment he saw her, his interest in the woman from earlier vanished. "Perfect? I've been longing to get my hands on General Esdeath's beauty." Licking his lips, Sura made his intentions all too clear. Since he had left the Empire years ago to travel the world, the Esdeath he remembered had merely been a general with exceptional martial prowess. He had no idea that, after obtaining the Tegu Demon's extract, she had transformed into something far more powerful. He foolishly believed that sheer numbers would be enough to subdue her. "Oh?" Esdeath let out a cold chuckle. "It seems I've been underestimated. But that's fine. Let's see what you're capable of." Her icy blue eyes flashed as she stomped her boot against the ground. In an instant, a surge of frost spread outward, freezing everything in its path: tables, chairs, the very floor itself. Had the restaurant still been full, the chaos would have led to countless casualties. However, most bystanders had already fled in terror from Sura's group. Asdith, of course, controlled her abilities to avoid harming the few innocent civilians still present. Sura and his men immediately leaped away to avoid being frozen. Dorothea, however, tried to use the commotion to her advantage, circling behind Asdith for a sneak attack. Her Tigu allowed her to drain blood from others, enhancing her strength and maintaining her youthful appearance. But before she could strike, Asdith simply flicked her hand, instantly encasing Dorothea in ice without even sparing her a glance. Sura finally realized Asdith was nothing like the woman he had imagined. Just then, a figure silently walked past Sura from behind. Blaine. Expressionless, he moved as if he were nothing more than an ordinary passerby. He didn't even acknowledge Sura, instead turning to Asdith and asking, "Asdith, weren't Sura and the others supposed to be here? I don't see them." The sound of his voice sent a shudder down Sura's spine. He hadn't noticed this young man's presence at all. It wasn't until Blaine spoke that he even realized he was there. Who the hell was this guy? Chapter 147, Honeymoon. Sura's expression grew tense. This was becoming troublesome. Asdith was far stronger than he had imagined, and now, there was also this mysterious young man with blood-red pupils. However, his Tigu, Shambhala, had just been used, rendering it temporarily unusable. Otherwise, he would have simply teleported Asdith and that red-eyed youth away. Blaine walked effortlessly across the ice, unaffected by the freezing cold. If it were anyone else, they would have already turned into a block of ice. This was thanks to his use of intangibility. It looks like that guy used some kind of Tigu to teleport them away. Judging by the distance, it must have been quite far. Asdith said casually. Hearing this, Blaine immediately turned to Sura and questioned him in an even tone. What kind of Tigu did you use? Where did you send them? Being stared down by those crimson eyes sent a shiver through Sura, but he quickly realized his reaction was cowardly and disgraceful. Trying to regain some control, he sneered, "If you kneel down and kowtow to me, I might consider telling you." Blaine's gaze instantly turned icy. This guy was asking for death. "It seems you still haven't grasped the situation," he said coldly. In the next moment, his left eye flared with crimson veins, locking onto Sura's left wrist. Kamui's activation had no warning. At most, one might sense a faint spatial distortion, but only those with keen perception could detect it. Sura, far weaker than Asdith, couldn't even react. By the time he realized what had happened, his left hand had already hit the ground. What? A sharp, searing pain shot through his wrist, leaving Sura utterly shocked. Asdith, witnessing this, was slightly surprised as well. It was the first time she had seen Blaine use this ability. During their last battle, she had seen something similar, but at the time, it lacked the sheer lethality that could outright sever a limb. "I'll handle those guys," she said, momentarily setting aside her curiosity about Blaine's power to focus on eliminating the remaining enemies. Despite facing 5 Tigu users alone, Asdith remained completely unfazed. More accurately, only 4 remained. Dorothea, whom she had frozen earlier, had yet to break free. Not only was she holding her ground, but she was also maintaining complete control of the battlefield. Meanwhile, Blaine had already stripped Sura of both arms, while Sura hadn't even managed to land a single hit. Blaine had confirmed that Sura was Prime Minister Honest's son and was well aware of the atrocities he had committed upon returning to the imperial capital. Had Sura kept a lower profile instead of rampaging so brazenly through the city, Blaine wouldn't have even bothered looking into whether Prime Minister Honest had a son. But since this guy had been so arrogant, it was only natural to eliminate the threat. However, before killing Sura, Blaine needed to know where Sura and the others were. "Who the hell are you?" Sura gritted his teeth, his voice trembling as he endured the pain. "I'm the one you've been looking for. Do you get it now?" Blaine replied casually. Sura froze for a moment before realization struck. "You're Blaine?" Blaine didn't respond, but the answer was already obvious. Before finishing Sura off, Blaine questioned him about Sura and the others' whereabouts. This was the ability of the Tigu Shambhala, a spatial-type Tigu capable of teleporting targets to predetermined locations. Sura revealed that Sura and the others had been transported to an uninhabited island in the south. Ding. The host has eliminated a Tigu user and received a reward, 40 system points. While Blaine was dealing with Sura, Asdith had already crushed Aizawa and the others, leaving them either dead or severely wounded. In Shen's Tigu, Moonlight Sword Dance, Shamshur, wasn't particularly strong in normal conditions. Its true power only manifested under moonlight, especially a full moon. But in this situation, he stood no chance and was completely overpowered by Asdith. Cosmina and Champ were also limited by their own strength. Ordinary Tigu users like them never had a chance against someone of Asdith's caliber. Among them, Aizawa was the strongest, but even he was merely a weakened version of Akame. At the very least, Akame needed to use more same secret technique to stand a chance against Asdith. Aizawa didn't even come close. Seeing that Blaine had already finished on his side, Asdith decided to wrap things up quickly. Once she had eliminated the remaining enemies, Blaine walked over nonchalantly and said, "Sir, and the others were teleported quite a distance away. I'll go and find them first. In the meantime, you can spread the word." He saw this unexpected situation as an opportunity. Spreading the news would create the illusion that they had suffered a major loss in combat power, which would, in turn, lure out certain individuals with ill intentions. However, Asdith ignored the topic for now and instead stepped closer to Blaine. "That ability you just used on him. I don't think you ever used it, even when we fought." She was still fixated on the matter, pressing Blaine for answers. "It seems that way," Blaine replied, feeling slightly awkward. He hadn't expected Asdith to remember such a detail, let alone care about it. "Well, at the time, I didn't think that ability would be particularly effective against you. More importantly, it's too lethal. I only wanted to fight you to determine a winner, not cause unnecessary harm." Blaine's explanation was straightforward. "I see. Though it sounds like you underestimated my durability a little, I don't dislike being cared for by you. In fact, I'd say I quite like it." The moment she finished speaking, Asdith leaned in and kissed Blaine. Blaine had long since gotten used to her sudden ambushes. This wasn't the first time, nor would it be the last. Afterward, he remained completely composed and said, "All right, let's go find Sarah and the others. If we go together, it'll make some people even more impatient to act. Let's consider this a honeymoon while we're at it." Asdith mused. "We may not be married, but with our relationship, we don't need something as trivial as a wedding to prove it." The terms honeymoon and marriage were things she had learned from Bowles. After all, Bowles was the only one among them who was married. Being older and more experienced in love, he even had a daughter a few years younger than them. Asdith had asked him about these things, including various ways to capture Blaine's heart. Chapter 148, Certain People's Actions. After Blaine and Asdith left the Imperial capital, the news spread just as Blaine had intended. Upon learning that Sir and the others had been teleported far away by the suddenly returned son of Prime Minister Honest and that Blaine and Asdith were setting out to find them, the leader of the Revolutionary Army was overjoyed. Just as Blaine had predicted, the certain people he had in mind specifically, the leader of the Revolutionary Army was preparing to join forces with foreign nations to launch an even bolder operation. At this moment, Blaine had already taken Asdith beyond the Empire's borders. Although he had confiscated all the Tegu, including Shambhala, he couldn't directly use it to teleport himself and Asdith to Sarah's location. This was because the teleportation points had been set by its original owner, Sarah. When Shambhala came into Blaine's possession, it essentially reset, leaving him with only random teleportation rather than the ability to transport to fixed locations. It was just like in the original manga, where Lubbock killed Sarah and took Shambhala, only to find that he could only teleport randomly. As a result, he ended up in the royal palace where he was promptly slain by Aizawa. Because of this, Blaine had to rely on double Kamui to move quickly with Asdith. Now that his overall attributes, especially his constitution, had reached a certain threshold, he could use double Kamui's teleportation ability frequently without issue. The farthest Blaine had ever traveled was the Empire's border. Since Sarah and the others had been teleported to an uninhabited island in the southern seas by Shambhala, he brought Asdith along and used Kamui space to teleport them to the Empire's southern border. As for places he had never been before, he couldn't teleport directly over such extreme distances. Instead, he moved with Asdith through rapid, short-range teleportation within his line of sight. "You're incredibly fast." Asdith, holding Blaine's hand, could feel his speed firsthand and couldn't help but be impressed. "Those guys will probably make their move soon. We need to hurry," Blaine said. The day after Najunda returned from the Revolutionary Army headquarters, the western and southern foreign tribes began stirring, first with border skirmishes, then outright invasions. Blaine strongly suspected a conspiracy between the Revolutionary Army and the foreign nations. Given the circumstances, there was a high probability that they wouldn't pass up such a golden opportunity. It didn't take long for Blaine and Asdith to find Sarah and the others on the uninhabited island. They could see Sarah's group locked in battle with a swarm of danger beasts. This place was teeming with them, but for Tegu users, these creatures weren't much of a threat unless they encountered a superclass danger beast. Right now, the real problem for Sarah and the others wasn't the danger beasts, it was figuring out how to return to the Imperial capital. They didn't even know where they had been teleported to. "Captain Sir, look! Isn't that Commander Blaine and Commander Asdith?" Wave was the first to notice Blaine and Asdith standing not far away. Hearing this, Sarah immediately turned in the direction Wave was pointing and, sure enough, saw them. She was overjoyed. "Master and Asdith found us so quickly?" "No. Wait. It's possible they were also caught in the teleportation. Maybe they were sent here just like us." After decapitating a danger beast in front of her with a single slash, Sarah wasted no time running toward Blaine and Esdeath. Master. Why are you here? Did you get caught up in this too? No, we didn't. We already took care of those troublemakers in the capital. We came here specifically to find you. Blaine explained. Sarah let out a relieved sigh. As expected of you, Master. You really are amazing. Compared to you, I still have a long way to go. Let's go. I'll use that Tegu to take you all back now. Blaine figured the cooldown for Shambhala should be over by now. Tegu of this type didn't require much adaptability from their users. Anyone with decent physical capabilities could wield them. Moreover, Shambhala's ability was incredibly convenient, allowing him to teleport a whole group at once. This saved him the trouble of transporting them one by one through Kamui space. Once everyone gathered in one spot, Blaine activated Shambhala. A massive glowing circle appeared beneath their feet, and in the next instant, they found themselves back in the imperial capital, more precisely, inside Esdeath's mansion. Blaine had previously set a coordinate here with Shambhala, allowing them to teleport directly to a fixed location. Commander Blaine, did you and Commander Esdeath eliminate all those enemies? At that moment, Run approached and asked. Yes. Blaine nodded. That's good. Run said, though his expression grew slightly complicated. While it was a relief that those people had received their punishment, he regretted not being able to personally take down one particular target. Something wrong? You look like you still have something on your mind. Noticing Run's expression, Blaine asked. Well, it's because I had a deep personal grudge against that clown-masked bastard. Run explained, I used to be a school teacher in the countryside, but one day, when I returned to the school, I found that all the children had been slaughtered in the most brutal way imaginable. And that man was the one responsible. Regardless, Commander Blaine, you avenged me. I truly appreciate it. If I had to do it alone, taking my revenge would have been far more difficult. His enemy was already dead, and Run had no intention of dwelling on it any longer. Blaine now understood. I see. I should have left that guy for you. No, Commander Blaine, I'm already incredibly grateful for what you've done. Run smiled. Blaine gave a slight nod, then returned to the main issue at hand. For now, stay here. I have a feeling certain people are about to start making their move. Chapter 149, The army approaches. Although Blaine and the others, including Esdeath, had returned to the imperial capital, they deliberately remained out of sight. Blaine met with the young emperor alone and instructed him to deploy troops to counter the invasion from the foreign tribes. As a result, the forces stationed in the capital became even thinner. When the leader of the revolutionary army received this news, he immediately assumed that the young emperor had taken the bait. Unbeknownst to him, it was a trap set by Blaine. He had no idea that Blaine, Esdeath, and Sarah's group had already returned. Seizing the opportunity while the capital was at its weakest, the leader of the revolutionary army led a faction of his loyalists along with a massive foreign army he had secretly brought into the empire. Their total force exceeded 100,000 troops, many of whom were elite soldiers. Additionally, he ordered Nage and his nitrade to focus on keeping the remaining Tegu users in the capital occupied. For a moment, the leader of the revolutionary army was certain of victory, believing the advantage was entirely in his favor. Nage immediately reported the situation to Blaine. Just stick to the plan. Sarah and the others won't show themselves, and Esdeath and I will step in at the critical moment. Your job is to keep Kiram and the others occupied to maintain the illusion. Blaine instructed. Then, he added, that being said, your opponent is the leader of your own revolutionary army. Have you all made up your minds? Of course. Nage smiled slightly, offering no further explanation. Compared to the revolutionary army's leader, she trusted Blaine far more at this point. After all, it was Blaine who had brought Esdeath to their side, Blaine who had toppled Prime Minister Honest, and most importantly, Blaine had never displayed any ambition of his own. That, to Nage, was the rarest and most valuable quality. In contrast, the revolutionary army's leader was far too obvious in his hunger for power. That's all I needed to hear. Blaine gave a slight nod. Now, all that was left was to wait for the enemy to march in. At this moment, from atop the city walls, the revolutionary army and the foreign nation's forces could already be seen launching a frontal assault. With most of the Empire's troops deployed to the borders to fend off the foreign invasion, the number of available soldiers within the capital was limited. The main force consisted of the elite Imperial Guard, led by Great General Do. To the revolutionary army's leader, Do was the biggest obstacle standing in his way. Their Tegu users were tasked with focusing all their efforts on bringing him down. Tatsumi, this is your first real battle. Are you afraid? At the forefront of the army stood Great General Do, with Tatsumi, Ayasu, and Seo positioned behind him. It was clear that the trio had passed Do's test. In Do's eyes, Tatsumi had the greatest potential, and he was highly satisfied with his growth. Ayasu and Seo, while not as exceptional, had proven themselves capable enough to accompany him into battle. No. If anything, this is a great chance to make a name for myself, Tatsumi said, his eyes filled with determination. Good. But remember, don't throw your life away. With that, Do let out a powerful battle cry and charged into the enemy ranks. It wasn't long before he became the primary target. All of the enemy Tegu users immediately coordinated their efforts to surround and attack him. But as one of the Empire's strongest, standing on equal footing with Asdith, Do held his ground even while facing multiple Tegu users at once. His Tegu, Thunder God's Rage, a Drumroll, generated an armor of lightning around him, massively enhancing his strength, speed, and defense. Any opponent who made direct contact with him would be paralyzed, and he could also summon thunderbolts for long-range attacks. Do moved like a bolt of lightning. His speed was overwhelming, and his strength was unparalleled. With a single punch, he sent one of the enemy's melee-type Tegu users flying, leaving them afflicted with paralysis. The unfortunate warrior convulsed violently, their body twitching in agony as if they had been struck by actual lightning. But being a Tegu user, they managed to survive the attack, though it would take some time before they could recover. Do's Tegu was especially effective against melee fighters like this. Watching Do take on multiple opponents without faltering, Tatsumi felt a surge of admiration. He silently vowed to one day reach that same level of strength. With one of their comrades already taken down so quickly, the remaining enemy Tegu users became more cautious, opting for a battle of attrition. Unlike Asdith, who constantly evolved her abilities, Do was not an unbeatable opponent. His strength lay in sheer, overwhelming physical power. He didn't rely on flashy techniques, only raw combat prowess. However, being dragged into a prolonged fight against multiple opponents was dangerous, even for him. In the original timeline, he had already been significantly weakened after fighting multiple enemies, and in the end, Mine had taken him down with an all-or-nothing attack that drained all her energy. But this time, Blaine wouldn't give them the chance to wear Do down. He waited for the enemy's Tegu users to gather together, then planned to wipe them all out at once. Ice Cavalry. As Blaine and Asdith entered the battlefield, Asdith unleashed one of her newest abilities to clear a path. A massive formation of ice cavalry materialized out of thin air, each one stronger than an elite soldier. While the true terror of this ability lay in its potential to build up energy and release a massive blizzard, Blaine had no intention of letting Asdith go that far. This time, ice cavalry would be used purely to deal with the enemy's main army. Meanwhile, Blaine arrived at Do's side and entered the battlefield using Susanoo. High above, he activated it, and the enormous spectral warrior descended from the sky. Boom! The sheer force of its landing split the battlefield apart. Ordinary soldiers caught too close to the impact were sent flying, completely overwhelmed by the shockwave. Chapter 150, Chelsea's Confession. What's going on? Look at those things. What are they? The sudden appearance of a massive ice cavalry, especially Susanoo, left the entire battlefield stunned, including the Empire's army. After all, even they had no idea that Blaine and Asdith would appear so suddenly, let alone witness Asdith using the abilities of the ice cavalry for the first time. As Asdith herself joined the battlefield, effortlessly crushing the enemy army with her absolute strength, the situation quickly became clear. It's General Asdith. Those ice cavalry were summoned by General Asdith. General Asdith has returned at such a critical moment. This is wonderful. Yes. Victory is certain. With General Asdith and the great general here, we will surely crush those ragtag troops. Even Lord Blaine seems to be here. Look at that blue giant next to the general. Doesn't it look just like Lord Blaine's ability? In an instant, the Empire's army's morale soared. At this moment, Blaine immediately activated Susanoo's fourth form, also known as the Tang form. In this state, Susanoo was clad in Tang armor over its original form, making it even more imposing. Its size had also expanded tremendously, surpassing 100 meters. This was the absolute limit of his current form, and he couldn't maintain it for long, but one slash was all he needed to end the battle. When the towering Susanoo appeared, the sense of oppression and despair it instilled in the Tegu users was overwhelming. Blaine said nothing, merely signaling to Great General Do to move aside. Then, he swung his blade. The slash was swift and decisive, unleashing a terrifying blade wave that seemed capable of devouring the sky and earth, consuming everything in its path. The sheer force of the attack reshaped the battlefield. Everything within 10,000 meters ahead was affected, transforming the land into a massive canyon. As for the Tegu users caught within the attack's range, not even a trace of them remained. The spectacle was so overwhelming that every soldier froze in place, staring in stunned silence towards Susanoo. The Empire's army was deeply shaken. They had always known that Lord Blaine was now the Empire's undisputed strongest, but the power he had just displayed far exceeded their imagination. On the other hand, the Revolutionary Army and the foreign forces were utterly broken. Many let their weapons slip from their grasp, while some even collapsed to their knees in despair. How can we possibly win? It's over. We're doomed. With a single slash, the enemy army's morale had been completely crushed. Almost no one had the will to fight anymore. Blaine did not unleash a second slash. It was unnecessary and risked harming his own men. His previous attack had already been deliberately aimed away from the ordinary soldiers. Moreover, maintaining Suzanu's fourth form consumed an immense amount of energy, so he had already deactivated it. Now, all that remained was to clean up the battlefield. The Revolutionary Army and the foreign forces had been reduced to prisoners of war. Blaine's orders were clear: they were to be kept alive. They would be provided for and not mistreated, but they would also have to work hard. The resources these prisoners produced, such as food and fabric, would undoubtedly outweigh the cost of sustaining them. The Empire had no intention of feeding a group of idle captives. Given the circumstances of this era, simply sparing them was already an act of mercy. Not long after, the invasion of foreign tribes was easily suppressed. The members of the Revolutionary Army who had supported Najunda returned to the Empire, where they were given stable jobs or directly enlisted in the military. Najunda once again assumed the position of Imperial General, while Bullet also became a general due to his exceptional strength. Akame, however, had no interest in status. She simply wanted to stay with her younger sister, Kurum. With internal and external threats nearly resolved, there was little left to worry about. The internal turmoil no longer needed discussion, and the only external issue had been the foreign tribes. But now, they had become completely docile, not daring to cause any trouble at the Empire's borders. With the Revolutionary Army conflict settled, Chelsea no longer had to suppress her emotions. Before, she had hesitated to act, unlike Kurum, who immediately reacted to the threat posed by Esdeath. Late one night, Chelsea found an opportunity to call Blaine out for a private conversation. "Is there something special going on for you to call me out this late?" Blaine asked. "It is something special after all. I'm confessing my feelings," Chelsea said casually. Confessing? Blaine was momentarily stunned. It was too sudden. "Yeah, I like you. Maybe this confession seems a bit offhand, but that's what I wanted to tell you." A faint blush appeared on Chelsea's face. There was no way she wasn't at least a little nervous. Blaine fell silent for a moment before speaking in a slightly conflicted tone. "Kurum, and now you too. Honestly, this puts me in a tough spot. I don't want to hurt any of you, but this just makes me feel like a terrible person." "Are you really still hung up on that?" Chelsea chuckled. "Besides me, Kurum, and Esdeath, there's also Sarah and mine. They both have feelings for you, you know. And I wouldn't even rule out Akame. So just face the truth, you're already a full-blown scumbag." Blaine was speechless. Of course, he had noticed Sarah and mine's feelings long ago, but he hadn't given it much thought without confirmation. "If you don't want to hurt us, then just embrace it and take responsibility. At the very least, you have to take responsibility for me," Chelsea said. Her tone was playful, but there was a seriousness in her last words. Blaine thought deeply for a moment before nodding solemnly. "I understand. I'll take responsibility for you, and I'll also make things clear with the others." "So, does that mean you're accepting my confession?" Chelsea asked. "Yeah." Blaine nodded. Chelsea smiled happily, but as joy filled her heart, she suddenly felt a twinge of regret. She probably shouldn't have mentioned Sarah and mine. Judging by Blaine's serious expression, he was about to act on it. Just then, mine appeared. "What are you two doing out here so late? Aren't you going to sleep?" Hearing mine's voice, Blaine immediately walked over to her. Seeing his serious expression, mine instinctively straightened up, assuming something important had happened. "Mine, do you like me?" Blaine asked directly without the slightest hesitation or warning. Chapter 151, Utter Scum. Mine was completely stunned. She never expected Blaine to ask something like that out of nowhere. Even Chelsea was a little taken aback. Blaine's question was way too direct. If he had asked this to a girl he wasn't close with, she'd probably find it off-putting right away. "Why you? What are you even saying?" Once she snapped out of it, mine's reaction was intense. Her face flushed bright red, the blush spreading all the way to her ears. "I'm asking if you like me," Blaine repeated seriously. I get that. What I mean is, why are you suddenly asking me this?" Mine asked in a low voice, still flustered. "Because I want to make things clear. I don't want to keep being confused about this," Blaine explained solemnly. "I see." Mine was still a little dazed but more or less understood his reasoning. Her first instinct was to deny it out of sheer embarrassment, but she forced herself to hold back. This was an unexpected and special opportunity. Being asked directly by Blaine was much easier than confessing on her own, sparing her the overwhelming embarrassment. Wait, let me get my thoughts in order first. She took a deep breath before mumbling, I wouldn't say I like you that much, but I do like you a little. Just a tiny bit. Even though she had made up her mind, she still couldn't shake her shyness and be completely honest. Even now, little mine is still so stubborn. Chelsea, despite technically being a rival in this situation, couldn't help but grumble in her mind. So you do like me? Blaine ignored the roundabout way mine had phrased it. Why yeah. Mine admitted, looking embarrassed. I understand. I'll take responsibility. I won't let you get hurt. Blaine placed his hands gently on Mine's shoulders, his expression unusually serious. Mine was left momentarily speechless. Then. You're staying with me tonight. The redness on Mine's face faded slightly as she spoke with unexpected seriousness. Hold on, what's this flat-chested girl talking about? Blaine should be with me tonight. Chelsea interjected, stepping forward. I am not flat-chested. Wait, were you also suddenly asked something like this by Blaine? Mine asked, her curiosity piqued. Nope, I confessed to him first. Chelsea said casually. Though, she didn't take credit for Mine's situation. If anything, it was her confession that finally made Blaine start thinking properly. I see. Mine nodded slightly. You two sneaky little kittens, did you really think I wouldn't notice? A familiar voice suddenly came from behind them. Both girls turned to see Edith standing there, a knowing smirk on her face. Chelsea's expression grew serious. Of all the rivals she had, Edith was undoubtedly the most dangerous. It all came down to Edith's personality. She did whatever she wanted without hesitation and wouldn't think twice about using force if necessary. No need to be so on guard. You're all people Blaine cares about, so I won't harm you. Edith said calmly. But let's get one thing straight. I have no intention of playing nice with you. Tonight, Blaine is mine. Of course, Mine and Chelsea refused to back down, and in the end, they all squeezed into Blaine's room. Naturally, under these circumstances, nothing was going to happen. That night, Blaine ended up as a human pillow for Mine, Chelsea, and Edith. The next day, Blaine still hadn't forgotten what Chelsea had said the night before. Since he had already decided to go all the way with this, he sought out the last person he had doubts about, Saru. He simply wanted to confirm something. If all of Saru's past actions were purely out of respect and admiration for him as her master, then he would continue treating their relationship as that of a normal master and disciple. So, it seems like every time I come to see you, you're always training. You're really dedicated. Blaine remarked as he watched her once again in the middle of an intense session. I have to work twice as hard. I don't want to fall further behind you, master. Even though she was already drenched in sweat, Saru was still full of energy and determination. But you should be careful not to overdo it. Blaine said with concern. Pushing yourself too hard won't do you any good. So, is there something you needed from me, master? If there's anything I can help with, I'll do my best. Saru asked eagerly. I just wanted to clarify something, Saru. How do you feel about me? Is it the kind of affection between lovers, or just the normal bond between master and disciple? As soon as she heard his question, Saru froze as if her brain had shut down. Her expression was stiff, and for a long moment, she couldn't respond. It was obvious this was not a question she had ever seriously considered before. After what felt like forever, she finally spoke, albeit hesitantly. If liking someone as a lover means feeling the way General Edith does, then I guess I still just like you as my master. I see. Just as I thought. Blaine said, unsurprised by her answer. After all, Saru had always acted differently around him compared to others. But, master, haven't you already? Saru trailed off, voicing the concern in her heart. It's fine. You all belong to me. Blaine said with a smile. Since he had already made up his mind, there was no turning back. Chapter 152, 7 Rides, and then I won't think too much about it. Saru nodded. She was still somewhat naive when it came to these things, but all she wanted was to stay by her master's side as long as she wasn't separated from him. That was enough. Edith, Kiram, Chelsea, Mine, and Saru. With this, Blaine had truly committed to leaving no regrets. Now standing firmly with 5 women at the same time. Recently, the Emperor obtained some interesting things from the Western nations. One of them is called a wedding dress. It's supposedly an outfit that brides wear when they get married. Let's go try it on. Today, Edith dragged Blaine along to try on wedding attire. However, Chelsea, Saru, and Mine happened to be nearby. The moment they overheard, there was no way they were letting Edith and Blaine do something like this alone. By the way, where's Kiram? Chelsea suddenly noticed someone missing. Judging by the time, she should be back soon. Blaine replied. Kurum had been absent for a while because Akame had taken her to the legendary secret spring. That spring was indeed effective in reducing the side effects of the drugs in Kurum's body, gradually weakening her dependency. If things continued like this, her reliance on the medicine would eventually fade completely. Blaine had made Kurum start tapering off the drug much earlier than in the original story. Unlike in the original, where it was too late by the time she stopped, leading to severe after effects, this time, things were turning out far better. Just as Blaine and Chelsea were talking about Kurum, she returned alongside Akame. "Commander, were you guys just talking about me?" Kurum's condition looked noticeably better than before. She hadn't been in bad shape before, but now she seemed even more energetic. Clearly, the secret spring had been very effective. "We're going to try on wedding dresses, the outfits brides wear when they get married. If you'd come back any later, we might not have waited for you," Chelsea said with a grin. "Wedding?" Kurum instantly understood what that meant and immediately responded, "I'm going." And just like that, the group set off together. Even Akame ended up tagging along, though it was clear she was mostly there for Kurum's sake. Imperial Capital Royal Palace. The wedding dresses were stored in the palace, along with formal suits for the groom. As they changed, Blaine was the first to finish putting on his suit. It fit him quite well. At some point, however, Spear, the daughter of Prime Minister Tree, also appeared. Curious about the wedding dresses, she had came to take a look only to unexpectedly run into Blaine and the others. She hesitated, feeling like she might have walked in at the wrong time. But then again, maybe it was the perfect timing. So she decided to be bold. Otherwise, next time, her father would tease her again about being too strong to find a husband. Mr. Blaine, can I try one on too?" Spear asked, her face slightly flushed. "Of course, go ahead," Blaine said casually. To him, it was just a trial fitting, there was nothing to make a big deal about. Then, when Asdith and the others finished changing into their wedding dresses, they discovered that today's bride lineup had unexpectedly gained another member: Spear. Asdith, Kurum, So, Chelsea, Mine, Akame, and Spear. Among them, Akame and Spear seemed to feel the most out of place. There were no cameras to capture the moment, but the palace had a dedicated painter who immortalized the scene on canvas. And this moment would forever be etched in their hearts. Chapter 153, Extra, Asdith, 1, Bowles, is this the wife and daughter you mentioned before? Asdith asked, glancing at the young, beautiful woman with long brown hair and the adorable little blonde girl in her arms. Huh? What are you doing here all of a sudden? Bowles looked even more shocked, as if he hadn't expected his wife to suddenly show up with their daughter. Honey daddy, his wife and daughter called out to him affectionately. You really are something, dear. You forgot to take your lunch with you when you left this morning. His wife explained the reason for their visit. Oh, I see. Sorry about that. Bowles scratched his head awkwardly. Daddy is so forgetful, the little girl giggled, looking especially cute. Watching the interaction between Bowles and his wife and daughter, Asdith seemed to be lost in thought. So this is what it's like to be married. It seems nice. She nodded slowly to herself. Well, I've been through a lot of tough times, but just knowing that my wife and daughter are there to support me keeps me going. Bowles spoke from the heart. I see. So the key isn't marriage itself, but having a child first, right? Asdith suddenly dropped a shocking remark. That seemed to be the conclusion she had reached. Bowles froze for a moment. Something felt off, but he had no idea how to respond. Asdith's words had completely shut down his brain, like a system overload. General Asdith. Just as he was trying to figure out how to explain things to her, Asdith had already left. Daddy, that pretty lady just left? The little girl poked Bowles' cheek with her tiny finger. Wait, was that the Asdith you always talk about? She really is stunning. His wife marveled. Yes, that was General Asdith. Bowles scratched his head awkwardly. But I think she misunderstood something. I just hope nothing bad comes of it. After leaving Bowles, Asdith immediately sought out Blaine. Without hesitation, she said, Blaine, I want a child. Huh? Blaine instinctively responded without thinking, but the next second, his expression froze. Wait, what did you just say? I said, I want to have a child. Asdith repeated, her face completely neutral. A topic that would normally be embarrassing for most girls seemed like nothing more than a casual statement to her. Of course, while Asdith wasn't particularly skilled in matters of romance, she had done her research. She knew exactly what needed to be done to conceive a child. And she had already done those things with Blaine before. It just seemed like she hadn't gotten lucky yet. Chapter 154, Extra, Asdith, 2, a child. Wait, do you really understand what that means? Blaine was still a bit stunned. He hadn't expected Asdith, of all people, to bring up something like this so suddenly. Of course I do, I know both the method and the outcome. Asdith gave a faint smile, as if this were just another casual decision for her. Well, if you've thought it through, then I have no objections. Blaine's expression grew serious. So, come on. Kiss me. Asdith was as direct as ever, wasting no words. Blaine, not wanting to be seen as hesitant, took the initiative and kissed her. Before long, with Blaine half pushing and Asdith half pulling, the two of them collapsed onto the bed. The night passed. Though they had exhausted themselves, Blaine's strong physique ensured he was fine. He was just a little drowsy after all, he hadn't slept at all. Eventually, he and Asdith drifted off in each other's arms. Not long after, Asdith suddenly started experiencing bouts of nausea. She wasn't familiar with this kind of reaction and found it strange that her body was acting up like this, especially since she hadn't been sick in ages. However, she didn't give it much thought and chose not to mention it to Blaine right away. It wasn't until the nausea became more frequent and her mood worsened that she finally considered discussing it with him. But when she entered the living room, she saw Blaine sitting with Kiram, sharing desserts and chatting with her, seemingly enjoying himself. Her already irritated mood soured even further. Although Asdith didn't say a word, Blaine could feel the temperature in the room drop sharply. He turned his head and, sure enough, found Asdith standing there. Asdith, what's wrong? Blaine asked immediately. Nothing. Her voice was icy as she turned and walked away. She wasn't sure what was wrong with her, but she felt the need to calm down alone. However, Blaine had already noticed that something was off with her, and there was no way he would just ignore it. Sorry, Kiram, I need to go. Alright. Kiram didn't seem to mind, continuing to eat the snacks Blaine had bought her with an expressionless face. Blaine quickly went after Asdith. Asdith, you're acting strange today. What's wrong? He called out as he caught up to her. Asdith didn't want to answer, but seeing that she couldn't shake him off, she turned and shot him a cold glare. Aren't you having fun chatting with that little girl, Kiram? Why don't you go back and keep her company? You're definitely acting strange today. If something's wrong, just tell me. Blaine gave her a slightly awkward smile. Normally, Asdith wouldn't speak to him like this. If she were upset about something, she'd usually be straightforward and commanding, telling him outright not to get too close to Kiram. But today, there was an unfamiliar hint of grievance in her tone, almost as if she were sulking. Yeah, I do feel a little off today. Asdith fell silent for a moment before admitting it. She didn't know why she was acting this way. Perhaps it was the persistent nausea, though it didn't quite feel like ordinary nausea. Finally, she decided to stop beating around the bush and told Blaine exactly what was happening. Even Blaine needed a moment to process what she was saying. After all, this wasn't something he was particularly knowledgeable about. Once he finally caught on, he hesitated for a moment before saying, Asdith, could it be that you're already pregnant? Chapter 155, Extra, Asdith, 3, really? Asdith was taken aback. She had never considered the possibility. After all, she hadn't even known what morning sickness was. But now that she understood the cause, that strange feeling of unease faded significantly. So, what should I do next? Just wait until I give birth? She turned to Blaine for answers. Well, to be precise, you should focus on nurturing the baby. I'll take care of you. Blaine reassured her, his tone serious. You may be an all-powerful general, but at a time like this, I'd really like you to rely on me a little more. Being taken care of, huh? Asdith gave a small nod. She was already deeply attached to Blaine, so she had no intention of rejecting his care. In fact, she happily clung to his arm, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. As a general, Asdith naturally had no shortage of attendants to look after her. However, even during her pregnancy, she only allowed Blaine near her room. After all, with her strength, she never truly needed anyone's care, and something as trivial as pregnancy posed no real risk to her. If even this could endanger her, she would have perished long ago in the wild, battling danger beasts as a child. Letting Blaine take care of her was almost purely for enjoyment. A few months passed. As Asdith's belly grew, she became fully aware of the life developing inside her. More precisely, she sensed that she was carrying twins. Her body was naturally suited for childbirth, and with her extraordinary abilities, even delivering twins posed no difficulty. When Blaine finally held the two newborns in his arms, Asdith used her ice abilities to seal her wounds instantly. Since she was immune to her own power, the method worked flawlessly. It didn't take long before her body was back to normal. Sitting by the bed, she leaned against Blaine's shoulder, gazing at the two tiny, adorable babies. They're both girls. Twins, and even. Blaine's voice held a note of surprise. They seem to have inherited your Tegu. Really? Asdith, too, was taken aback. Look at the mark on their chests. It's identical to yours. Blaine pointed out. The elder twin had inherited Blaine's black hair, while the younger sister had Death's signature ice blue locks. Both bore the same mark on their chests, the symbol of the Tigu demon god manifestation, Demon's Extract. This is unbelievable. A Tigu should only have one rightful owner. As Death murmured, her mind racing. Maybe it's because Demon's Extract is a special blood-based Tigu. And since you drank an entire pot of it back then, it likely altered your bloodline without you realizing it. Bloodline traits can be passed down, though they usually weaken over generations. Blaine speculated. That explanation does make the most sense. But this works out well. I wouldn't want my daughters to be weak. As Death's words sounded harsh, but the love in her gaze as she looked at her children was unmistakable. The massacre of her father and clan had taught her that the world was ruled by the strong. Yet, if she had been given a choice back then, she would have done anything to protect them. Her belief in survival of the fittest had always been a way to steel herself to ensure she had no weaknesses. But in reality, if she had the power to save someone, she wouldn't just stand by and watch them perish. She had shown that much to her subordinates. How could she not do the same for her own daughters? Of course, the cold and ruthless Death of the past had already begun to change under Blaine's constant companionship and care. She was no longer the cruel woman who once unleashed Ice Commander-in-Chief upon the Empire, turning entire regions into frozen wastelands. That being said, her core personality remained the same. Have you thought of names? Death suddenly asked. I was just thinking about that. How about I name one, and you name the other? Blaine suggested. Sounds good. Death nodded. I'll name the older one Shiranui. Blaine decided, choosing a name that matched his own. Shiranui, huh? Then I'll name the younger one Shirayuki. Death followed suit. Blaine smiled warmly, gazing at the two tiny figures in his arms. Shiranui, Shirayuki. Welcome to this beautiful world. Chapter 156, Extra, Kurum, 1, Kurum, your body still hasn't recovered from the damage caused by those drugs. In fact, without specialized treatment, it's almost impossible for you to recover on your own. Akame spoke seriously to Kurum. I've heard that there's a secret spring within the Empire's territory that can help restore your body. Come with me. Alright, I'll listen to you, but I want Blaine to come with us too. Kurum sat beside Akame, the two sisters leaning against each other. Ever since their relationship had improved, they had been inseparable. Blaine? I'll ask him later. Akame had no reason to refuse Kurum's request. I've noticed that whenever Blaine overuses his abilities, his body becomes extremely weak, and even his eyes start bleeding. If this keeps happening, I'm worried his body might suffer serious problems. Kurum voiced her concerns. She had first noticed this back when she and Blaine fought the superclass danger beast Death Tigul in the Sea Cave. After witnessing the toll it took on him, she couldn't help but worry, especially since she wasn't aware that Blaine's body could recover on its own. I see. Let's go find him and ask him to come with us. Akame nodded, understanding how Kurum felt. Thank you, sister. Kurum smiled. Before long, Akame and Kurum found Blaine in the royal palace, playing chess with the young emperor. Just as they arrived, the game had reached its conclusion. I lost again. That's 10 defeats in a row. The young emperor looked utterly dejected, nearly collapsing onto the chessboard in frustration. Against Blaine, even if the great Han chess sage Liu Qi himself were here, it wouldn't have made a difference. Don't be discouraged. You've improved a lot, Makoto. Blaine patted the young emperor's head reassuringly. He was the only one who dared to call the emperor by name and casually pat his head. Even as Death, despite her authority, usually addressed him with a respectful Your Majesty in public, as she was mindful of formalities. Ugh. I want another match. The young emperor quickly regained his fighting spirit. Blaine, Your Majesty, Kurum and I are sorry to interrupt. Akame entered and spoke directly. Akame, Kurum, do you need something from me? Despite being interrupted, the young emperor showed no sign of annoyance. He was naturally kind and simple-minded. Besides, Akame and Kurum were Blaine's companions, and Blaine had helped him eliminate Minister Honest. No, Your Majesty, we're here to find Blaine. Akame explained. Oh, I see. Then go ahead and talk. The young emperor nodded. Blaine, make sure to play chess with me again sometime. No problem. Blaine nodded, then followed Akame and Kurum out of the palace. As they walked through the palace grounds, Akame explained their purpose. I was planning to take Kurum to the secret spring I mentioned before to help her recover, but she wants you to come with us too. Akame's tone was as neutral as ever. Me? Why would I need to go? Blaine was confused. He had no reason to visit the spring. Blaine, your eyes must be a huge burden on your body, right? I'm worried something might happen to you, so I want you to come with us to recover. Kurum stared into Blaine's eyes. I appreciate your concern, but my body is perfectly fine. I don't need any kind of recovery treatment. Blaine smiled. Kurome's worry touched him, but he genuinely had no issues. I don't believe you. If you don't come with us, then I'm not going either. Kurome suddenly turned stubborn. Kurome, don't be so unreasonable. Akame tried to persuade her, feeling anxious when she saw her sister refuse to go. Fine. I'll go with you. Happy now? Blaine sighed in defeat. He had no way to argue with Kurome when she got like this. Good, then let's go. Hearing Blaine agree, Kurome instantly dropped her stubborn act and returned to her usual blank expression. With that, Blaine, Akame, and Kurome boarded a flying special class danger beast and set off for the secret spring. Chapter 157, Extra, Kurome, 2. At this moment, Blaine, Akame, and Kurome had arrived above the secret spring. Below them was a hot spring surrounded by mist that looked almost sacred, not like ordinary steam. The location was incredibly well hidden, perched on a rocky ledge halfway down a cliff. If you weren't looking from above, you'd never know it was there. We're here, Akame said, guiding the special class danger beast to descend. Even before stepping in, Blaine already felt a soothing sensation in the air. It seemed that even without any hidden injuries to heal, just soaking in this spring would be a treat. As he was thinking that, he turned his head only to see that Akame and Kurome had already taken off their clothes and were about to remove their underwear too. I'd better step away for a bit. Blaine immediately turned and walked toward the far end of the spring. Kurome was one thing, but Akame wasn't exactly someone he was close to, so out of courtesy, he chose to give them privacy. But then Kurome suddenly grabbed his hand. What are you avoiding for? Hurry up and strip down so we can soak in the hot spring. Kurome urged. Akame didn't seem to mind being seen at all. After removing her underwear, she even reached out to undress Blaine. Kurome's right. You need to be completely naked to get the best effect, she said, quickly stripping him down to just his underwear. Stop. Blaine quickly stopped her. At least let me handle this last part myself. Even if Akame wasn't bothered, he definitely was. Akame finally let go. If he hadn't said anything, she probably would have pulled off his underwear too. Blaine turned around to deal with it himself. By the time, both Akame and Kurome were already in the hot spring. Even while soaking, Kurome had casually brought along a bag of Kurome snacks. Happily munching as she relaxed in the water. Blaine, come on already, she called, waving him over. Blaine had originally planned to go to a separate pool, but he knew Kurome wouldn't like that. So, he reluctantly headed toward them. Since he walked over openly, Akame and Kurome naturally got a full view. Sis, is that a man's thing? Kurome whispered to Akame. I don't really know much about that. But probably, Akame replied. Neither of them looked the least bit embarrassed. They stared directly at him, whispering in low voices, but even then, Blaine could still catch parts of their conversation. Their gazes didn't help either. He felt himself getting a little flustered. Blaine said nothing and quietly sat in the water near the edge. They say it works better if you soak in the center. Aren't you coming over? Akame asked. Seeing how far he was, Kurome's tone turned a bit annoyed. Why are you sitting all the way over there? I'm still a normal man, you know. Don't you have any sense of danger at all? Blaine finally said. Akame tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. Are you going to attack us? Sis, not that kind of attack. He means he might eat us, Kurome clarified. Just as Blaine had said, these two really didn't have the slightest sense of danger.